What's going on, family? How is everybody doing? How is everybody doing? We are here for the book club. We are here for the book club. If you all have not read it, The Color of Money, Black Banks, and the racial wealth gap, well, then you just out of luck, because today is the day that we're gonna have a conversation. So if you don't want to hear what it's about, then just do you. That's your own business. We warned you well ahead of time and told you to pick up the book. If you didn't do it, that's on you. Anyway, while y'all are in there, please hit that like button for me. If you can do nothing else, just please hit that like button. I appreciate it. Hit that like button for me. Please share. Please share this video. Please hit that bell if you have not hit the bell. I would appreciate that as well. Please hit that bell so that you get notifications. Those of you who are here probably, already got them, but we know a lot of people don't. So we're gonna get right down to it, because ain't nothing to it but to do it. Oh, also go to subscribetobrown.com as well. Subscribetobrown.com. I would appreciate that as well. Just add your name to my list, to my email list. It costs you absolutely nothing just to go there, add your name and all that good stuff, and it's wonderful. If I need to reach out or send a news alert or something like that I think you might want to know or need to know, I can do that, and I appreciate being able to do that. So let's get down to the nitty and the gritty, if you will. For those of you who fall in a little bit later, you just fall in a little bit later. That's just life. I told you I was gonna be a few minutes early, like 20 minutes from what the normal fall in time is. So, fam, let me just say something. The Color of Money, before I get into, I like to frame stuff. So before I get into the specifics of it, I think this book is so important because it dispels so many myths about not just black banking, but black capitalism in general. And I think it kind of goes to like the kind of pushback that you see me have so often in terms of this. So when you hear me and you're like, wait, Yvette, what's wrong with you? Don't you like money? Everybody like money. Yeah, that's not where I am. So it's not about not liking money. It's about understanding what the engines of that money are, and understanding how we have not been able to access the engines for that. That's what it's about understanding. So I want to start at the beginning, because it's really about exclusion. It's about being excluded from American life in all walks of life. And when you talk about wealth, that's banks, that's policy, that's everything. So let's start off, ladies and gentlemen. Let's start off on page 1. Page 1 is always a great way to start a place. It's a way to start and get yourself together. So let me put some over here. Gosh, this thing. So when you go to page 1, I want y'all to go to the last paragraph for me. Let me get myself situated over here. Get these little markers out the way. All of this stuff. It's too much goings on over here. So anyway, go to page 1. And when you go to page 1, you see something. Go to the last paragraphs. That what I was telling you. The last paragraph on page 1. You see what it says right there in the introduction. It says banks are the drivers of wealth creation for any society, and banking policy is integrally tied up with politics and power. And yet scholars have all but ignored the black banking industry's unique role in black wealth development. Now put a pin in that, because that's what we're talking about. We're talking about what the key drivers of wealth are. It's not some kind of hard work. It's not just the bank. Your bank has to have, you have to have policy. So let's go. Let's keep it moving. Let's go to page 3 really quick. Let's go to page 3 because we're still in the introduction. It says, go to the second paragraph. President Nixon threw his weight behind black banking so that he could oppose controversial desegregation programs and woo white moderates and conservatives unwilling to push for further racial reforms. So as we get to the part about Nixon, what we're going to learn is how Nixon did what he did. He got us very caught up in certain ideas about banking and wealth and it's an aspiration, because we wanted to be American. That's all we ever wanted. We ain't never wanted to tear nothing down. We didn't want to do that. We wanted to be American, and we haven't been allowed into that space. And he came along with this thing, and we thought it was good, and it wasn't good, and we didn't know. It was all propaganda. And that's what I see even in so many of these black capitalist gurus. They think they're continuing the tradition of black capitalism, not understanding that that's never really been a tradition. It's mostly been propaganda, from the Freedmen's Bank, which goes into here, to when you go all the way back. Go all the way back. When you go to the Freedmen's Bank, come all the way to Nixon. It's like this myth. So let's go to page 6. Let's go to page 6 real quick. And just understand this one line on the beginning of the third paragraph. I just want you to understand this one line, because you have to really understand that. It says the black ghetto and the white suburb were created by heavy state intervention. You go to the next page. It says this book is a challenge to that premise. Now, what it's talking about is this free marketeering and all that, and it lays bare the fact that the hand that drives black poverty is not a neutral and invisible one, but rather the coercive hand of the state that has consistently excluded blacks from full participation in American capitalism. So there is no free market capitalism. That's the premise of the book. You gotta go, whenever you read a book, make sure you find that one part to tell you what the book gonna be about. Okay, so what you're telling me is that there's never been free market capitalism for us. It has never existed. That's exactly what we're being told. That's exactly the theme. I don't know what is going on with the interwebs. So let me go on to the I think is this page 3? No. Hold on, let me go back. Because on that same, we're going to get to this further on in a second. But one of the things that you find at the bottom, I don't want to go before I get out of this. Go to the bottom of page 5 before we come out of this. The ghettos that initially trapped America's other immigrant groups did not eventually improve themselves out of existence. Once they were no longer segregated from the mainstream economy. In fact, the dilemma faced by black banks is highlighted when contrasted with viable banks created by Italian, Jewish, German, Irish, and Asian immigrants. Each of these immigrant groups faced discrimination and exclusion like the black population. But the key difference was that none of them was systematically, uniformly, and legally segregated to the extent and for the length of time that the black community was. See, what you find towards the end of this book is that they were allowed at some point to become white, right? And you see a lot of that. Well, you see it become law. New Deal time it becomes law. But you even see it before that. But what you see is them becoming white at a certain point and us never becoming white. Us being our exploitation remaining the engine. What do we always say on this show? Black exploitation. You know, we are the gasoline. Our exploitation is the gasoline that this country runs on. And so other people are able to move and access whiteness, but not us. And that is how we live. And that's a big deal, because you can't make the immigrant story anymore. Nobody's saying you didn't work hard, but we're saying that you're not black. and in that black we mean ADOS, and that means something very specific in terms of what you were able to do, especially post New Deal, and what we were excluded from doing. And I always said that, like, I really wish that, like, every immigrant population that comes here is forced to read books like this to really understand, so that they don't buy into white supremacy. There should be an immigrant education when you come in. And that immigrant education should include books like this, so you don't buy into white supremacist ideas that it's just that black people didn't work hard. So, and you find that with the Bank of Italy that became Bank of America, it's the same thing. So go to page 7 real quick, and then we'll head on to chapter 2. Oh, we already did that, I think, the values. But go to page 10. So go to page 10, because we got to talk about that. This is go to the, well, chapter 1, I'm sorry. Go to page 10. Now, this is important because one of the other things that we keep hearing right about now is that, well, slavery wasn't this, slavery wasn't that. It really didn't do the minimization of slavery in terms of finance. It says this: it was slavery and the blood. This is page 10, first paragraph. It was slavery and the blood drawn with the lash that opened the arteries of capital and commerce that led to U.S. economic dominance worldwide. The effects of the institution of slavery on American commerce were monumental. 3.2 million slaves were worth 1.3 billion in market value, almost equal to the entire gross national product. Read that last little part for yourselves. Equal to almost the entire gross national product. So how does anybody say, well, we're all the same and we're all immigrants too, and we know you did your contribution equal almost the entire gross national product in terms of what you were and who you were and what your contribution was? We have a very specific contribution and a very specific kind of oppression. This drives that home. Now we got to keep going because there's a lot of good stuff in here. I want to go to page 13 because page 13 this list of we've always had. You have to ignore this myth that, well, I heard an elder, quote unquote, say not too long ago, well, what part of the problem with black people is that we just never really fought for ourselves. We never really did anything for ourselves. And I wondered, like, how can you say that and be taken seriously? We've always had people to fight intellectually and otherwise. So I don't even understand what that means. But I want you to listen to this list and see and listen if it doesn't ring true even today. Now go to page 13, first paragraph. Abram Harris, a prominent black economist in the 1930s, listed the barriers to black enterprise before the Civil War in the following order: the difficulty of obtaining credit, capital and credit, right? And we're talking credit that's non-predatory because that's what they did later. They said, I'm going to give you capital, but it's going to be predatory. Okay. Number 2, low wages, competition for jobs, and immigration. Number 3, mob violence. Number 4, occupational restrictions. Number 5, prohibitions against owning certain types of property. Number 6, denial of the right to sue. Number 7, restrictions against settlement in the West. And number 8, civic and educational handicaps. Harris emphasized that the greatest handicap was without a doubt the difficulty in obtaining credit. And we don't understand. We still seem not to understand as a group that in terms of how you scale and how you move, you have to have wealth, you have to have credit. These things have to be, you can't be in a separate economy. You have to be in the one economy. There has to be one American economy or you are shut out. If you can't just have the lines of capital or credit to black people, because black people ain't got no money. And that's what you see with these black banks. They volatile and have all kind of problems. You know why? Because black banks can't escape black people and black life and black oppression. And that's what the book says here. So let's go on. If you go to the last paragraph of page 13, it says, in other words, it was through banking that American wealth was created. And we were excluded from banking. And black banking was never banking. And the Freedmen's Bureau was robbed from us. So I mean, we put money away, and it made us, the whole problem with the Freedmen's Bureau after a while was, even beyond the fact that these speculators came in and took the money. Like, I don't think we really understand the problem of, like, how we still have a group that doesn't really want to deal with government or see government as our government, because government has robbed us and oppressed us so often. And that becomes a central issue to what we face. So go to page 14 for me. When we talk this, go to the first paragraph. Now, the first paragraph, the first line is important. Bank credit creates wealth, which is why the isolated free black community kept trying to create its own segregated banking system. Bank credit was needed to augment capital. But could a bank be created without capital? That's us Negroes. Oh, Negro. Could bank lending lead to wealth creation, or did banking only work to multiply already accumulated wealth? In a circular economic rut that would be repeated throughout history, there was too little available capital to create a bank that could extend credit so that more capital could be produced. And black banks' access to capital was limited because they did not have access to political power. Say that again. Our access to capital was limited because we did not have access to political power. You see, the political power comes first because the political power sets the rules. It sets the pace. It sets the tone for everything you're going to do. If you don't have political power, you cannot just segregate yourself and be off to yourself. Booker T. Washington, bless his heart, was wrong. You cannot just cast down your buckets either. We have to understand who was right and who was wrong. It's important. So let me go on to the next thing. We still in the same chapter. You go to page 17. You see. I want to go through this kind of quickly. I know I'm going through it kind of fast, but I have to. You see how Andrew Johnson, the accidental president, because Lincoln assassination, assumed Lincoln's office, joined the white Southern backlash, and rolled back Lincoln's promises. So we didn't get no 40 acres. All the Confederates came back and got what they got. You see, one of the things that you see whenever you read a book like this and all these books is that racism, people like to pitch racism to us as just like, well, people are going to grow out of that, and the kids of today ain't going to be like the kids yesterday, and everything going to be different and wonderful. No, this is not what racism is. You have a very pedestrian, a very rudimentary, if you will, understanding of racism if you believe that it's this kind of individualized thing. Now, sure, they have to keep individuals believing in a certain thing to keep it going and pumping and everybody to be with it. But the issue is it's a systemic thing. It's very systemic. It's very intentional. And I think we don't tend to understand that. We tend to look into the hearts and the minds of white America and the rest of America, and we think we can just get rid of it with stereotypes. And you don't understand, like, there were all these moments from 40 Acres and a Mule, and we talk about Andrew Johnson to Nixon to LBJ to Obama to Bill Clinton, Eisenhower, even before. Like, there were all these moments where everybody had an opportunity to make us American, and they chose not to. These have been state-sponsored decisions, and that's something that we have to kind of grapple with in our own way. Let me go to let me go to page 24, because on page 24, what you see, I'm not necessarily going to read it because I want to try to get through some things. I'm not going to read all of it. But what you see is that banks have to be able to lend. It's not just enough to say I have a black bank. Banks have to be able to lend. And what we have was mortgages. And when our homes don't accrue value over time, you have like debt on your books that's not good debt, right? And so and then you have people who are making volatile. This is a volatile group because we're poor and we're underclass. So we're a volatile group and we're taking money in and out. And there's something in there. What was it called? Fractional lending or something like that, where you're supposed to be able to not have that. That's what makes you a profitable bank. If you don't, you're going to have problems. And that's what we can't. The problem with black banks is that they can't escape like black people. And so you have a problem which becomes a policy problem. It's not a banking problem. It's not an individual problem. Let me see. See, it says look at page 22 in that second to last paragraph. Instead of land, freed slaves got rights and they could not use due to their economic and political status at the bottom rung of society. So you have to have wealth. You have to be able to move freely. And at a certain point, America has to make white people integrate with you. I don't know. There's no other way to do it. So let's continue on to, this was a very disheartening thing to read, but you go to page 44 and you see kind of, one of the things you see is how many black people really tried to do the right thing in terms of banking and tried to build banks, and how they were shut out, and there were people who had to write charters. And they're not gonna write you a charter, and they're not gonna give you the money, or we're gonna save all the rest of the banks, right? So we're gonna give them loans, right? We have mechanisms as a government set up, but we're not gonna get a black bank a loan, so you go under, right? Isn't that what happened? That's what happened. So one of the things that happens with this book is that you should be able to like see like the con of like, well, we just gotta bank black. What does that mean? So you go to page 46. Let's read this quote. Oh, let me read this on page 45 first. To survive a bank run, a bank can either find liquidity from another bank or sell off its loans to another bank in a fire sale, so that it can meet depositor demands and live to open its doors another day. But both of these solutions prove very difficult in a Jim Crow economy, as seen in the case of Penny Bank's failure. The bank first sought liquidity help through a short-term loan from a local bank, the Steiner Brothers, but that larger bank chose instead to help another struggling white bank, the First National Bank. Yeah, that's what happens. Can't get what you need when you need it. Let's go to page 51. When you go to page 51, what you realize is that, like, same thing that's happening now. Like, a lot of these businesses aren't really businesses. So you go to you go to page 51, that first full paragraph. The absence of factories, railroads, and black enterprise on a large scale hindered black banks. Black business would remain pebbles on the shore. But there would be many pebbles between 1867 and 1917. 4,000 black-owned businesses grew to 50,000. By 1930, the number of black businesses had grown to 70,000. Many businesses arose as a direct response to segregation. See, you're responding to like not being included in the economy. That's not wealth. That's not wealth building. That's survival. So let me just go to the next one. Producing goods and services for blacks in the self-help economy. Du Bois' survey, WB, of 2,000 businesses with over 500 in capital found that most had evolved from occupations dictated by slavery. House servants became barbers, restaurant keepers and caterers. Field hands became housekeepers became barbers. Field hands became gardeners, grocers, florists, and mill owners. Those who had been plantation craftsmen used their talents to become builders and contractors, brick masons, painters, and blacksmiths. This is self-employment. This is not business. You need those big business contracts. You need those big business dollars within the bank, and we didn't have that. And then at a certain time, remember when the Irish became white, we got pushed out of a lot of those professions even. No protection by government, no help. And this is around the time that Booker T. Washington was pushing that idea. This is around the time that Booker T. Washington was pushing that idea as well. Right? Like he started the what did it start? Booker T. Washington founded on that same page 51. That's where we are now. The National Negro Business League in 1900 to help promote and develop black business. But he didn't want to challenge white supremacy. You can't really promote black business if you don't want to challenge like white people or white supremacy excluding us from the economy. Because the economy is the overall economy. There is no black economy. We're not a state within a state. There is no black economy. And that's why you found even white businesses come in and upsell and charge. And people called it exploitation. And to an extent it was. But also because of how the credit was set up. It was set up in such a way that we were a risk and we were cordoned off in the ghetto, while white people after the New Deal was sent to buy houses, and we had these little dilapidated apartments and everything else. So it was set up for us to be a third world group within a first world country. That's what it was. So let's go to page 52. One thing you find on page 52, go to that second paragraph. Unlike Du Bois' statistically heavy treatise, Washington's book contained a series of inspirational success stories. So Du Bois did a whole thing on black business with data and statistics. Who does that sound like? Washington came and had just some success stories, and because we love being inspired and it's gonna make us feel good, aimed at highlighting the undoubted business awakening among the Negro people. Go to page 53. The main financial challenge was that black business relied exclusively on the clientele, on black clientele. So you can't just do that. You have to be able to rely on everybody. White people were then and are now the majority. You just can't be reliant. It doesn't work if that's what you have to do. Jim Crow segregation prevented black business from branching out into white customers. That's a shame. You had page 66. You had Truman showing the KKK movie at the doggone White House. What kind of president is that? That's page 66. Woodrow Wilson. Wilson purged the federal bureaucracy of any blacks who had managed to secure government job. He prohibited the hiring of any black employees and fired those his predecessors had hired. See, that's page 66. That's Woodrow Wilson, President Woodrow. I don't know if everybody really understands that what this is basically saying. There's no way to exist, fam, in a I don't care what your do for self motto is, and your little black bank and your little black self. There's no way to thrive in a country where the government is weaponized against you. You can't just fire. You just went in and fired all the Negroes. You can't. It is the ignorance that we have got caught up in to believe that somehow you can work your way out of that. Okay, but anyway, let's go to page. Let's go to page 88. Skip ahead a little bit. 88. Before we go to 88, understand that this is a good quote. They talk about Garvey. Garvey enthusiastically embraced capitalism and preached the gospel of success that included self-mastery, hard work, and sufficiency and self-sufficiency. That's 82. But this is very interesting when you start talking about Malcolm X on page 83. Malcolm X would resurrect Garvey's vision years later, as would the Black Panthers, the Nation of Islam, Rastafarianism, and other black radical groups. Black nationalism was a distinctly political philosophy and a direct result of racism and segregation. See, so much of what we are in terms of our political philosophy, is reflexive And we think, no, this is us. We decided that black nationalism was our thing. No, we decided it because we had to, or we felt we had to, or we felt this was the right road because we were excluded from the main economy. But we never should have been excluded from the main economy. We should have the wealth right now in the main economy. That's what we should have. And if we have, what we should still fight for is the wealth from that, the reparations from that, right? To be a part of that, as opposed to like sticking to this idea of we just want to have a segregated economy. No, if you want to be a capitalist, you should want to be able to sell, to have the wealth to build and sell to anybody that you want to sell to. Don't white people sell to you? Don't make no sense. Go to page 70. Well, I skipped something. Go to page 73 real quick. Because 73 kind of goes to, just really quick, the importance of credit. So you see Jesse Binga running around trying to do the stuff, start the bank, do this, do that, right? So Binga used all means available to him to save his bank and his customers' deposits, including lending the bank his own money. The balance sheets of Binga's bank from 1929 to 1930 revealed that the bank held $800,000 of home loans in default. Great Depression. So you just go on there. You like we bail out everybody, but our banks didn't get bailed out. We just whatever. He reached out to the Chicago Clearinghouse for a short-term loan from the fund he had helped build, but was rejected in his request. And this goes to why it was allowed to fail. Skip down. It says yet the Binga Bank was allowed to fail because owners and masters of the credit facilities of the nation did not care to save it. You can't live in a place where you don't get no credit. Well, credit is an engine of everything. Like in terms of banking, you got to be able to, like, what happens if everybody else gets saved and you don't get saved? Well, you just fail. That's what happens. It's really not complicated. You fail. You can't compete. You are an underclass group. The bank's failure erased the wealth of many members of Chicago's black elite. So when you even look at the terms of, like, we don't have an elite class of people, and we don't have an elite group, and we don't have an elite this or an elite that, what you see is still government at play. Like, the hand that's here is not like, well, we should have did X. Well, we should have did Y. No, there is a hand at play. It's just not, it's just government's hand. Or government not forcing the hand of banks and other institutions of credit and the drivers of American capital to be fair in how they deal with us. So we just go a little bit and lose everything. We go one step forward and 18 steps back of no fault of our own. That's quite a pickle to be in, but you wouldn't know it listening to Boyce and others. Go to page 89. Let's skip on ahead. Now this goes to the problem of black banks. Now let me start on 88. Last paragraph. We're going to read all the way because this is the core of all of this black banking stuff that I still hear. Black bank deposits, this is bottom 88. Black bank deposits differ from those of white banks. They were smaller and were more frequently withdrawn, which made them more risky. Most black depositors had no stores of wealth to invest in the bank and were just depositing money from their wages, keeping small amounts to live on. They put their sums into black banks for safekeeping, but also looked to those deposits as rainy day funds during frequent stormy weather. Well, who made our weather stormy? America. Deposits so small and volatile are a costly liability for banks. Banks spend the same amount of money in overhead and servicing costs for a deposit of $1,000 as for one of $1.50. Let me say that again because I messed that up. You have to understand that. Banks spend the same amount of money in overhead and servicing costs for a deposit of $1,000 as for one of $1.50. But the larger deposit can yield more profit when it is lent out. In other words, a bank receiving 3 large deposits amounting to $500,000 from 3 big businesses spends less money and makes more profit off those deposits than a bank that receives $500,000 of deposits from 5,000 people. Black banks had much higher operating costs than white banks because they spent more and earned less from poor customers. This creates a highly volatile situation. The next paragraph. A customer base that deposits little and withdraws often creates a less obvious financial bind for banks. Because of the volatility of their deposit, black banks had to keep more cash on hand as reserves or invest in other more liquid assets such as government securities, which were safer than loans. They did so because they needed to make sure they always had enough cash at the bank to pay out to depositors. Black banks are hemmed up because they're black. Unless you can escape blackness somehow and escape hatch yourself out of there, you cannot escape the volatility and the problematic everything that is problematic about having a profit or competing with a white. How do you compete with a white bank? You have to end race. You have to fix race in America. That's the only way you do it, and you can't do it as an individual. Now let's go to page 93. See, this is what always happens with me with books. I just be going and going and going and going. So black banks had mostly like these mortgages, and you know what happens with our housing in terms of what we couldn't. So go to page 92 on the second paragraph. For banks, these mortgages created severe balance sheet problems because loans often went underwater as soon as they were issued. Why did these loans go underwater as soon as they were issued? Because they were issued to black people. That's it. That's it. So not only were black banks losing the value of their investments as their mortgage properties declined in value, but these loans also created a liquidity bond for black banks because they could not sell them quickly. Black banks had highly illiquid assets, which were eventually stuck on their balance sheets, and there was no ready market to buy black mortgages. And that's because of so you're not a part of the you're not a part of the credit system. You're not a part of the regular mortgage system. Who wants to buy this? The only person who wants to come in here and buy this is these little contract people, because this is so volatile and you're a bottom cast. What I have to do is make my money back real quick. So I'm gonna sell you a house or something, right, on this contract buying thing, but it's gonna be real expensive. It's gonna be real expensive. You're gonna be a quack-a-dack-a duck. See, go to page 94. See, you have to understand let me write this down because I want to come back to this. I want to come back to wealth creation and money multipliers, because that's what a bank is. That's what it's supposed to be, especially through lending, right? Okay. The money supply increases from, this is page 94. The money supply increased from $100 to $1,000. This is magic of fractional reserve lending. Put a pin in that thing. Every time a loan is made, a deposit is created. To repeat, banks create money or bank deposits by making new loans. This money multiplier effect is what makes banks the engine at the center of the economy. The new money is created literally out of thin air. It's magic or hocus pocus. This is what Alexander Hamilton meant when he said that banks allow capital to acquire life and become productive. Banks increase the overall wealth of a community by simply taking deposits and lending them out. But you can't lend if you are a black bank. It's too volatile. You don't have enough money. There's a lot of reasons you can't lend. Now let's try to get through the rest of this book. I took too much time. Let's go to chapter 4. Page 115. Oh, I want to hit that, but I can't. I'll let y'all hit it when you call in. Did I say 115? Okay, so you have somebody who was trying to start black banks, get loans, all that stuff. So what did you have to do? It didn't work out. So you go to the last couple of paragraphs of page 115. It says, well, go. Let me go a little bit. So we could talk about the gentleman, but you see, the black man eventually had to go get a $200,000 loan from an immigrant Polish bank, right? So what does it say? See, that's what we have to understand. This whole, well, you're just like immigrants. No, he had to go he couldn't get a loan. He had to go get a loan from an immigrant Polish bank. Think about that. You've been here 400 years. Never been made American, so you have to get a loan from this other bank in order to do what you're trying to do. The cost of maintaining black pride, that's at the bottom of page 115, and personal dignity, wrote Travis, can be extremely high. Finally, through the intervention of a personal friend, Travis secured a loan of $200,000 line of credit, from a local immigrant Polish bank so he could start his mortgage business. Because he was trying to loan. But here's the thing about, even with the FHA, he was trying to get mortgages and give mortgages to black people. And they were going to be, like, these were supposed to be, like, FHA backed. So even if you did this, like, there was no risk. Hey, bank, there's no risk. If I get this, I got this thing, it's going to be still, no. Maybe we give you $15,000. Somebody offered him $15,000 for that. But no, we're not going to do it. See, laws are only as good too as the enforcement of those laws. So you can have all the laws you want to have, but if nobody's going to strictly enforce those laws in terms of what's beneficial and in terms of not only anti-discrimination but wealth building, then you might as well just be chasing your tail. Go to page 124. You see the same thing. The frustrating dilemma of black banks is highlighted when contrasted with banks created by Italian, Jewish, German, and Irish immigrants. This is like the third paragraph. That they are often compared to. Though these immigrants were never segregated to the extent that the black community was before the Great Depression, they were discriminated against by white banking sector and had been forced to create their own banks, just like us, right? So what's different? Okay. No Italians and no Irish signs were prevalent during the era when racial dogma deemed these groups inferior and unworthy races. The plight of these other marginalized immigrant groups parted ways significantly from blacks only after the New Deal reforms and the end of the World Wars. These immigrants would eventually leave their overcrowded ghettos and settle in white suburbs where blacks were still barred entry. Their banks reflected these immigrants' own integration. For example, the Bank of Italy was forced in San Francisco to serve Italian immigrants who could not get loans from white banks. The bank was founded in 1904 by Italian immigrants Amadio Giannini for the same purpose that black banks were created, to serve the black population that was being discriminated against by the mainstream banks. But this bank would have drastically different trajectory than Binga's, who was the black man who tried to do the bank. And the divergence would mirror the disparities between assimilation of Americans immigrants and its native blacks. Eventually, the Bank of Italy grew and merged into the mainstream U.S. banking system, just as Italian immigrants assimilated into American society. What was formerly the Bank of Italy became the Bank of America, the largest and one of the most profitable banks in the country. See, you have to become white, though, and whiteness is normalization. There's nothing more than that. Whiteness is normalization. It's only us who are just kind of stuck at the bottom. Remember that Texaco article that said we were stuck at the bottom like little black jelly beans? Yep. It was awful, but it was right. And so what you also have, you go to page 137. 137, they start talking about... go to page 137. So instead of one... Hold on, that's 138. I don't even know my pages. Go to the last paragraph. They talked about ending segregation. was not the same thing as integration. But I think we even push back a little bit at integration, because who wants to be next to people that hate us? But we're American, and that's where the money is. And that's where the money is. So you talk about, you see the push for reparations. Hold on one second. You see that. Now let's go to one of the things that's very interesting is how, not only that this is cyclical, one of the things that's very interesting is how there were new oppressive ways created, right? And new oppressive mechanisms. So, women came up with, when you go to page, if you go like to page 150, if you go to like page 150, they start talking about discrimination in terms of credit, right? And all of this stuff. So, but what you find is, okay, we can't do it that way. We're going to find another way to oppress you. Okay, we can't ask your race. We're just going to figure out where the Negroes live. And we're going to do it through zip codes. And we're going to know what you in a black zip code because redlining was a thing. And these redlining maps bled their way into all kinds of other stuff. So the way you have mechanized oppressing us is really something. It's really a masterstroke. And I don't see how anybody in this day and age can say, well, it's not that, Yvette, it's not this, it's not that. No, no. We see exactly what it is, and we see the cause. Let me see. Go to the bottom of page 150. One path toward equality was to integrate the credit market. By concentrating the poor in income and the poor in assets in the ghetto, segregation had condoned off the riskiest borrowers, cordoned off all the riskiest borrowers. Large national chains could avoid this area entirely and thus avoid the higher costs of underwriting, servicing, and collection. That is what they were doing, but not all of these borrowers were poor credit risk. In fact, most of them were not. If they could have been giving, if they could have been given lower cost credit, the more they paid for loans, the greater the debt burden, and the greater the likelihood that it would break them and they would default. So, if I have less debt, then I'm gonna pay it. I'm good people. I got it. But you give me all this stuff at all this high cost because I'm not getting wages. I'm not getting money the same as white people. I can't do this. I can't do that. So you give me all this. You stack me with all this debt, and then you blame me for not being good with my money when I don't pay the bill. Oh. And you see what we've been saying on page 151. The alternative was to it says, but integrating the credit market would have been difficult to do without physical integration, which was simply not politically feasible. The other alternative was to break the poverty cycle directly by giving black residents an infusion of capital to jumpstart the wealth creation. The racial wealth gap had been created by state law and policy, and so a reversal of the racial wealth gap through a program of reparations would have been justifiable, still justifiable. But while forced integration would have been feasible and unlikely, subsidizing black communities was inconceivable. You see how they did us? Ooh-wee. Let me see. Let's go through. Let's continue, people. The one thing on 152, I'm not going to go into something else though, but it said something is very interesting. It said, and it's good to keep this in mind. And I think about this when I think about Bernie. Everybody can believe whatever they want to believe or support. I'm not against anybody supporting anybody, but anti-poverty is not wealth building, is not wealth creation, is not redress. And so that's kind of where I am. As you get to page 154, you see everything that institutional racism did to kind of make us believe it's our fault. You see that with Moynihan, and like he does this report where you talk about racism, but you also kind of hint that when you go to the bottom go to that second paragraph on 154, Moynihan acknowledged that American racism was the original sin responsible for the gap in the economic opportunity. Having diagnosed the problem as being rooted in historic harm, he proposed that the way to fix it was to address black culture, which he described as a tangle of pathology. Now understand understand what was wrought. So now we have pathology. So now you have people talking about if you only pull your pants up, if y'all didn't have so many babies out of wedlock. So you're going to undo. You don't understand that black people are like a plant, right? We're only as healthy as the soil. And America is really toxic, salty, trash soil. And so a lot of the things that are happening are as a result of this thing. So you're looking at, so there's an illness, and the illness, like you have a flu. We all talking about corona now, but you have a flu. The symptom is you sneeze. And so you go around and you sneeze, and so you sneeze at a job interview, you couldn't get the job. That's like telling somebody, well, you don't get the job because you sneeze at too many interviews. No, I don't get the job because I'm sick, and I sneeze because I'm sick. You don't want to repair the illness. You just want to say, well, if you weren't sick, this wouldn't happen to you. That's black pathology. At 165, let's go to 165 real quick. Black capitalism, the decoy of black capitalism, chapter 6. This is your boy, Boyce. J. Morrison. Let's go to 165. Black capitalism was disguised as a program catering to black communities' own demands, but what black leaders had been asking for was control of the infrastructure and institutions, local power to grow capital. Nixon should support the concept of community controls. And that's what somebody said. But here's the other thing about Nixon, and this is very interesting. Because this is a powerful commercial. This is a Nixon commercial from that period. This is a powerful commercial. They're telling you that your child ain't gotta be no factory worker. He can own the business. This time vote like Homer Pitts. Whole world depends on this time vote Nixon. He'll get his degree. Then what? Laborer, factory job, or own his own business. A vote for Richard Nixon for president is a vote for a man who wants Homer to have the chance to own his own business. Richard Nixon believes strongly in black capitalism because black capitalism is black power in the best sense of the word. It's the road that leads to black economic influence and black pride. It's the key to the black man's fight for equality, for a piece of the action. And that's what the free enterprise system is about to do. He made you think your child was about to become a businessman. But what was really going on was this. If you go to page 167, what you see is Romney. You see, I don't know what happened to poor Mitt, but you see George Romney working at HUD, and what he was trying to do. There was one time he said, and they had been rivals, but there was a law that banned racial discrimination in housing, including steering blacks towards segregated neighborhoods, and any intimidation and coercion of black homebuyers, a common tactic of northern segregationists. So what Romney was trying to do was use the federal government to enforce the laws against discrimination by holding the purse, right? So I'm gonna hold the purse. Okay, if you're gonna discriminate against blacks, I'm gonna hold the monies because I got them. That's the power of government. I have all the money. Government has all the money. What you gonna do? You gonna barbecue a mildew? I got all the money. That's what George Romney was trying to do. But Nixon was like, yeah, but white people ain't gonna like this, and I'm not gonna put no money towards no budget for none of this stuff. So what I'm gonna tell black people, I'm gonna use the language of black nationalism. I'm gonna use the language of Malcolm X. I'm gonna use the language of black people about pride. I'm gonna use the language of Garvey. But I'm not gonna put any money in a budget for these people. I'm gonna tell them that I'm their best answer in black capitalism and the free market. But I know, as well as you know, that this is not going to happen because white people don't want it to happen. But I want to win. I'm an elected official. That's what I want to do. I don't care about these people. So Nixon, go to page 167. Go to that second paragraph. Nixon had to contend not only with this recent mandate, but also with George Romney, his HUD director. Romney took the charge to affirmatively further fair housing as seriously as HUD director before or since. He was a perpetual thorn in the Nixon's side in many respects. Now let's jump down a little bit. Romney was the only member of Nixon's cabinet interested in pushing forward civil rights instead of pulling back. That was that. He tried to use government in terms of zoning. Romney ordered HUD to reject. This is on 168. Reject any applications for water, sewer, or road projects from any state or municipality that fostered segregated housing. Romney did not clear his strategy with the White House, and as loud complaints rolled in about HUD grant rejections, they were direct to the president's desk. Nixon was livid and put an end to it immediately. I am absolutely opposed to it. Knock it in the head now. What kind of gangster stuff he be saying? But he did that every time. But Romney kept trying until he couldn't try no more. And then his son ended up being Bain Capital. It's got to be a disappointment. But this is why you need government. Anybody who tells you, well, government ain't this and government ain't that, and we shouldn't depend on government. Policy is everything. Policy is king, queen, and all kind of in between. I don't know what you're going to do without it. Or what you think you're going to do without it. We live in our imagination sometimes. You got to follow the money. You sitting on 182. And that was the language that we used. I think even some of our leaders, and we don't really talk about it, because I understand what you were going through. You mad. They won't include us in the regular economy. We're going to build our own economy. Not understanding that the regular economy that you have to be included in, they're not going to let you have you can have a Jim Crow economy. And there's no way to make money. That's a survival economy. That's not an American economy. It's not even an autonomous economy, which is what you need. So you don't understand that this doesn't work, and this is why it doesn't work. And this is why it can never work. You have to have an integrated economy, and just having black business isn't an integrated economy. You can't even sell to white people. That's who got all the money. You can't sell to people without the money? Or you can't get reparations so your people have the money? Well, how is that going to work out? I ain't seen it. You see all of these people. You see even Jesse Jackson start talking about he was anti-capitalist. He becomes capitalist on 191. Adopted that language. Said you would rather own an A&P than set one on fire. Right? You see a lot of stuff happen. There was a whole back and forth with him, Stokely, Carmichael, everybody. Everybody was in this. And it makes sense. I understand it. I'm not saying that I don't understand why it happened. Manning Marable called it snake oil. He had a big fight going on. It's a lot of stuff that was going on. You had one bank that survived everything. I was going to go to it. It survived everything but couldn't survive Obama. Ain't that something? And what Nixon did and what Clinton did and a lot of these people did, I think even Carter did this, but a lot of folks did this. This is what you even saw with Nixon, instead of giving policy, they gave us charity, and it was voluntary. Even with Nixon, affirmative action was a voluntary thing. It wasn't a voluntary thing. It wasn't, we're going to mandate it because that makes white people upset. So we can't be free because it upsets white people. That's kind of what we are. And so even with Obama, you saw that. And the difference is we really applauded it in 2000 and whatever year this was, my brother's keeper. And we don't understand still, it seems to me, the importance of laws and regulations in terms of wealth creation, and the political power to create those laws, as opposed to symbolism, which is what this is. So we heard about the high operating cost of the banks. It's awful. This really is a thing. So go to 203. Go to 203. 203. 203. Adding even greater insult to injury was the government deposits. Instead of bringing money into the black community, were diverted were diverting black banks out of the black community. Instead of using deposits to invest in the community through local lending, black banks were overinvested in government securities on the asset side, which, according to one economist, turned black banks into a conduit by which local deposit funds are exported to other markets through sales of federal funds and purchases of securities. The black banks were taking deposits from the community and channeling them to investments in government securities that were being used to finance mortgages in other communities. So hold on, understand what's happening because of the needs of the black bank and because of how the black bank is situated. The money has to leave and go into another community, right? Because I have to invest securely now because I lend and my bank is black. So you put into government securities or whatever, so it goes into out of the black market into a white economy. That's not a segregated economy. There's no such thing. And if there's one thing that we can learn, I'm going to have to come out of this in a second, but we'll still talk about it when you all call in and everything and everybody calls in. But there is no such thing as a black economy. You would have to have control of that economy. And I know a lot of people advocated on behalf of that. There are a lot of people in this book who advocated on behalf of that. That was never going to happen. You were never going to have that control. And if you don't have that control, you're still an exploited group. You have a black bank in name, but if it's investing, if the money is leaving that black bank and not investing or lending to you, but it's in securities and other stable stuff, because it's going to invest white because the money's white. So the security is in whiteness. So what does that look like? That looks like the money leaves you. And that looks like you can't even really invest in your people like that because your people are a risk because of what America's done and nothing that you've done. That's quite the trick bag. And there's several stories in here of bankers trying to do it. Black bankers really doing the right thing, all the right things. There are several stories in here of riots, of wealth being taken and snatched. You can't have anything if nobody's going to protect your wealth. There's no wealth to be had if nobody's going to protect it. If you can't have credit, there's no wealth. If you can't have access to real capital in a real bank, and that's not a black bank because of what they've done to us. If you're not going to make us white, then I don't see how any of this, how you do any of this, right? We let Bill Clinton, this is a line in this book, and I talked about this before, how we let Bill Clinton say, if Martin Luther King was here, he'd be mad that y'all are shooting each other on the street. No, Martin Luther King Jr. would be mad at what he saw before he died. That things were mostly staying the same. This book mentions MLK's depression. That things were remaining the same. He wouldn't be mad at black people, he'd be mad at you, Bill Clinton. For mass incarceration, for having the levers of power and choosing to do nothing for the Negro. And the fact that we even let Bill Clinton and others stand before us and speak about us in such a disparaging way is problematic in terms of who we are, who we think we are, and what we believe about ourselves. But I'm going to open the line up in just a second. I just want to say that, a black bank isn't a bank. And it's not because of anything. We love to blame the black banker and say, well, you're not a banker because you didn't save the pennies and you didn't do this, you didn't do that. The Freedmen's Bureau in this book, they took it. They squandered it all away and kick everybody in the ass. Because honestly, they made it look like it was a real bank. Like it was the credit, it was gonna be, it was like Lincoln himself was standing with the bank. Then you had, who was it? Was it Roosevelt or Carnegie who came in there and decided that they did a bank too, but it was only a savings bank. And we don't even understand that the real money's in lending, not in the savings. So they just said, we're gonna come here and take your money and teach you how to do thrift. No, you're just going to take my money and invest it or something. And then you're not going to lend my money back to me. And you're going to make me feel good about it because you're going to give me 2 tellers to work here. Roosevelt, somebody said, yes. Oh, yes, it's not. Isn't Roosevelt the one who also, Rockefeller. It wasn't Roosevelt who invited Booker T. Washington to the And Booker T. Washington was the most accommodationist man of the time. And they still sent all that hate mail in there talking about the rats ran outside because there was a black man in the White House. Ain't that something? That is something, something, something. Anyway, fam, I want to get your pages together. If you read the audiobook, just tell me what what it said and get your quote together. Give me a second. I'm gonna set the phones up and I will be right back. It's a shame. What's going on, fam? I am back. I'm back. I'm going to go to the first call. I don't see a number, so uh-oh. Let me see here. I think it's anonymous. So I have a few anonymous calls on here today. I don't normally answer them, but it's book club time. So let's go.
Hello.
Hey, fam, how you doing?
Pretty good. How you doing, Yvette?
I'm doing all right.
Hey, I like what you're doing. You know, my daughter Kiana and her boyfriend Teju, they real followers of you. You know, you're doing good things.
Okay, I appreciate that.
Yeah, you know, efforts, you know, being made by Black Americans build wealth. You know, that's been traced back throughout American history. You know, but the effort's always been impeded by a host of ways. You know, with 246 years of chattel slavery, and followed by the congressional mismanagement of the Freedmen Savings Bank, which what you was talking about.
Mm-hmm.
And what happened was the controller of currency, they regulated the white banks, but they didn't regulate the black banks. The Congress regulated Freedmen Savings Bank, and they were lax in their regulation and allowed Freedmen Bank to lend with mortgage-backed securities. So what happened was when the economy collapsed, just like in 2006, mortgage-backed securities was the main corporate. So it was like history repeating itself.
Well, they were speculating. They were speculating at the Freedmen's Bank, right? They said they wouldn't. They explicitly said it was going to be like a savings bank, and then they started speculating.
Yeah, that's what it's supposed to be. And after the post-war era, you know, the economy was going up and down, and the main asset that bank had was government securities. And so what happened was when the price of government securities went down, that had an effect on how much the bank can pay its depositors. And so what happened, they said, okay, well, what we going to do, the Congress said, well, we're going to let them lend backed by mortgage and securities. And that failed. And that's what happened to the bank. And it left like 61,000 depositors in losses, or nearly 3 million. And that happened in 1874. And also, there was also an area called Tulsa Greenwood District. Had a population of 10,000. It was the epicenter of African-American business and culture, commonly referred to as Black Wall Street.
Yep.
Well, they let that fail too with the policies of the 20th century, you know, including Jim Crow era, the Black Codes, limiting opportunities, many Southerners, GI Bill, the New Delhi Fair Labor Act standard, exemption of domestic agriculture and service occupations, and the redlining.
I understand, fam. I got to keep it moving, but I understand the history of the redlining and everything.
Well, I did want to say one thing. Wealth was taken from these communities before it even had an opportunity to grow.
Exactly. Thank you, fam. I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
All right.
sound like he was laughing. I'm going to 646. This you, Master?
Yes, it is. Can you hear me?
I can hear you just fine. Thank you so much for calling in. We have the book's author on the line.
So
Master Bahadar, and I appreciate you calling in and talking a little bit about the book, because we talked a little bit about it in Louisville. But I wanted to ask you a couple of questions if you had a moment. Well, the one thing that I wanted to ask, and I didn't get into it on the show, was that I wanted you to kind of hash out for me. What is the importance of credit in creating wealth? Because when we talk about black banks, one of the things that I don't hear a lot, and I kind of touched on it, but I don't, and I understand it to an extent, but like, what is the importance of black banks being able to lend out money in terms of being able to build wealth?
So I would say, what I call the Jim Crow credit market is all we've offered to the black community has been predatory, high-cost credit. And what we've given when we want to enhance wealth to whites is FHA loans, GI Bill loans. Looking at the bill right now from the Senate that I was, we're hashing out right now. Look, this bill is all basically 0% to 3% interest loans to businesses. When we want businesses to retain wealth and to build wealth, we give them loans that are somewhere between 0 to 5% interest.
Okay.
Black communities, since sharecropping until today, have been given predatory credit. So one type of credit strips wealth, and the other type of credit builds wealth. And it's a really important thing, because credit is not bad or good. It just depends on the type of credit. So payday lending targets black communities, and that strips wealth. Subprime credit targets black communities, strips wealth. But, good mortgage credit, good student loans, good, credit has been offered to some people, actually builds wealth, right? Because you can use it as a leg up.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and is that so you can use it as a leg up? You can build, like you can scale, because we don't have any money. So if you don't have any money, you have to have credit. Like we already don't have wealth, right? So is that what you mean when you?
Exactly.
One of the most interesting parts of the books though was about, and I didn't know, because I'm not into banking. But one of the most interesting things in the book was about what it means for a bank to be a money multiplier. Like we don't talk very often about what it means to have for a bank to be a money multiplier. And so so a black bank couldn't be a money multiplier. What in your mind, or what would it look like to have a black bank, or what would just in political imagination? What would it take to have a black bank be a money multiplier?
Okay, that's I think one of the central things that I want people to understand from the book is banks create money. When banks lend, they make money. So it's not like they just take the deposits and they stay in the system and that's all the money there is. As soon as a bank lends, it actually pushes money out into the system. And so that's it's a complicated process, but I think it's really important to understand. So there's two scenarios where black banks can be money multipliers and create money for black wealth building. One scenario is complete segregation, the type that Marcus Garvey and Malcolm X push, where you have sovereignty and ownership of the community and the buildings, right? You have to own the land, you own the businesses, you own the citizens, the political power, like you were saying, right? You have, like if you consider the black, ghettos, I say in the book, if you consider them as a colony, one of the things that colonies understood was you can't build wealth and have autonomy unless you're a sovereign. So that's one path, is sovereignty. Right? You own everything. Mm-hmm. And then you can create wealth because you have that wealth. The other is that the black banks were part of the whole system. In other words, white banks and black banks were lending to and borrowing from the same people. And that has never happened. We've always had a segregated housing system. We've always had a segregated banking system. So you can imagine a scenario where Asians or Italians, like I say in the book, the way that other immigrant groups like Italians gain wealth is when they are able to gain housing that increases in value alongside whites. And one of the things that black communities and black individuals have never been able to have is, moving into a neighborhood that is black, as soon as it tips over a certain percentage, those property values plummet. That is the cost of racism, but it also means that the banks that are lending on those homes are not able to accelerate the wealth that the way that the other banks are able to do.
So the real problem is one of race, right? Because the only thing even if we have a house, right, and that house is the same, it's built the same brick, same layout. One house is in a black neighborhood, one house is in a white neighborhood. The only difference between those two houses is a bank is what and what one is worth is like what one is willing to pay for it, right? And what this comes down to is race. So one of the things that was so problematic to me is that even if in this book even if a white person is trying to do the right thing, Even if a white person is trying to, I want to sell to a black person. It's sort of the way the caste system is set up. They've made us a contagion to wealth. So I guess my question would be, right? Let's say we have a progressive president, and they say, how do we do something to like make black people not a contagion to wealth anymore? Like, I know that's a big ask, but like, what would the beginning of that look like?
Yeah, so look, I mean, we have a society where there is a stigma to blackness, and a house and a neighborhood and a school is worth less because it is black. And let me put it another way. A home, a neighborhood, and a school that is white gains value because of whiteness. And that is the way that racism plays out sort of subconsciously, structurally in economics, right? And it's embedded in our tax code. It's embedded in our local districting, right? So how do you change that? I mean, you change, explaining this history, I think, hopefully, destigmatizes some of these questions. I think you do have to get root racism out, but you also can change the economic structure such that the racism doesn't play such a large role. So, for example, local schools get taxes from the homes, right? And so this history is explicitly racist, right? Why not just put all the taxes in a pot and distribute them evenly, right? Reparations, as you point out, like reparations is essential. And what reparations can do actually is bring in wealth and political power, and with that, destigmatize these racial gaps, right? So once you have a community that is on par with the surrounding community, then you don't have that stigma. You don't have that wealth being sucked out of one into the other. So there's several ways to go about it, but we just have to stop. I think one of the myths in American society is that somehow, racism is about feelings and about, Klansmen and just these, Bull Connors. And no, racism is about when you go and you buy a house in a white community and you send your kids to that all-white school and you pay your taxes into that all-white neighborhood. That's how racism shows up on balance sheets, right? And in wealth.
And that's interesting. You say shows up on balance sheets, right? So somebody can say, I'm well-meaning. We all just want good education for our kids, but this is what this means for your kid, and this is what this means for my kid in terms of opportunity. And another thing that struck me about the book, though, was how, we have been, and even in terms of your policies, it's very interesting. In terms of your prescriptive mechanisms, it's very interesting because what you hear now and what we've heard, even when you talk about Nixon and all of that, was like, well, we're colorblind. But does it make any sense to kind of talk about being colorblind when you haven't fixed race? Like, race is embedded in the economy. How can you be colorblind now without fixing the thing that brought us here in the first place, in terms of not just like individually, you don't hate me because I'm black, but we haven't fixed. It's sort of, to me, it's sort of offensive when people say, well, I'm colorblind. Well, color has meant something for 400 years. You can't say now I'm colorblind. There have to be real mechanisms in place to kind of fix the things first before we kind of pivot to like color blindness, don't they?
Absolutely. I mean, it's the biggest lie. I mean, colorblindness is a lie, and so is the idea that, I would, I love everybody. I don't care about the color. You take out that one line of MLK's, incredibly powerful whole speech, and you say, all he cared about is content of character. That's bullshit, right? Like, MLK is all about structural racism, right? Yeah. He fully understood that this wealth gap was embedded into the structures of American society. American society is not colorblind. Our tax code is not colorblind. Our housing is not colorblind. Our schools are not colorblind. Our politics is not colorblind. You live in some la-la land if you think you don't see color. And of course, then you say, like, okay, well, then take your kid out of whatever school you put him in and put him in the black school. And they're like, it's a behavioral problem thing and whatever, and so what inherently people are saying is that school is not good enough for my kids, but it's good enough for those kids, right? And those kids happen to be black.
And don't bring those kids to my kids. No, I said, they say too, don't bring those kids to my school. Like, I don't want that either. Like, no, I'm not, my kids not going to that school, and I don't want them to come to my school. That's been the battle in New York.
Exactly. And I don't want the cops, my neighborhood, but it's fine that the cops are shaking down those kids. We just, but honestly, I think one of the things that Trump has done is kind of blow that myth away, because I think this was a myth that a lot of sort of liberals kind of held on to, and now we're kind of like, no, you know what, he's actually just said, we're just going to be racist, and now everyone's like, oh, it turns out we were always racist, and so I do, maybe I'm a naive person, but I don't think we go back to color blindness. I hope. I mean, I don't know. Biden is he's all sorts of a mess on this race stuff. So, but I do think there is a distrust of anyone who talks about color blindness anymore. I hope we don't go back to that lie, but politics always surprises me, so I don't know.
Well, I have another question for you, because and then I'm gonna try to let you go, but it's not just part of the problem as we look back through history, right? A part of the problem, and I don't even know if they knew that they were being a problem. I go back and forth on that. Like, the extent to which Booker T knew he was being the worst kind of accommodationist or whatever. But part of the problem that I have, or part of what I think about, even as I talk today, part of what I come up against, we just had the black banking movement, right? So everybody's saying bank black. You should just put your money in a bank. We had Usher, I think we had Killer Mike, and shout out to him, I like him. But I want you to kind of give a word to before you go, to people who believe that, like, it's sort of a revolutionary act, or it's going to be somehow transformational, or build black wealth to take your money and put it in a black. And I'm not being mean to black banks. I'm just talking about what that means in terms of, as opposed to what people think it means.
Yeah. Okay, that's a really, really good question. I try to tread very carefully on the topic, because I do think there is a movement where black banks can be used as a boycott and protest, and that is effective. That can be effective, right? I mean, MLK, Malcolm X, and others who knew that you needed structural changes, you needed political power, but still said, take your money out of the white banks and put it in the black banks as a boycott, like the way that they boycotted the bus system, right? So, so that's a different. And Killer Mike, when he was pushing for bank black, he was saying, take your money out of the dog's mouth and put it into these banks, put it into the black banks, because these banks aren't representing you. They're sending the cops and all this stuff. So I think what Killer Mike, the movement started with an act of protest, like following along with Black Lives Matter. And so I think that is a useful way of just using it as a boycott. But if you think that putting your money in a black bank is the way to build black wealth, I don't think that's right. As to why Booker T. Washington, my sense is that there's a market for ideas, and the white power structure picks the black voice that suits them sometimes. And I don't think that the person who is saying it necessarily has to be a sellout or bad person. Like, I mean, not to compare me. I think Booker T. Washington was a very influential. He had he believed in his moment of uplift, but he was also supported by Dale Carnegie and all of the sort of white industrialists of New York. They were funding, Tuskegee. They were the ones. They chose him to give their money to, in other words, right? And you look at people today, like, I won't name names, but there's a lot of prominent black, both pundits and intellectuals and judges and all of them that toe the line, and those are the people chosen for prominent positions, and you know this very well, any black person who is willing to, hold water for white supremacy is going to go far in their career. They're going to have speaking gigs, and they're going to be on the high courts, and so there is a way that, I don't know if they believe what they're saying, but it is heavily rewarded in the market of ideas.
Okay, yeah, because it's hard to tell. Like, I try to put myself back in those shoes, and it's hard to say what you would do if you were in those shoes during that time. There was something I read a while back about how Booker T had really high blood pressure. Well, I suppose so. So I think
it would have been impossible to survive. Yeah.
Yeah, and it was, and the thing is, everybody was trying to be right. Like, when you look at it, even Martin Luther King, one of the most interesting parts of the book is even King. The one thing that King had in common with Garvey, had in common with Malcolm X, had in common with all these people were believing in, like, well, we do have to invest in ourselves, and it's kind of like what you said in terms of a protest. I think what happened, and I don't know how we come out of this, but I think what happened is something that was more than financial. Something happened psychologically where we kind of said, you know what, if these people don't want to be around us, we don't want to be around them. Screw it. Well, I understand that, but like everything you said in this book, to me, leads down a path of you have to, I'm not talking about just only living next door to somebody, but you have to be an integrated part of the economy. Everything you do has to be a part of the economic system that is the American economic system and is the economic engine of the, of a large part of the world. And in terms of globalism, there is no space. You don't have a standing army. You don't have any of the other thing that makes you a nation. You are not a nation within a nation. So I don't see from where I stand any other way to do this without somehow infusing, us with capital and then becoming a part of what America is, or what America was supposed to be for us. And I'm gonna just let you have the last word on that.
Yeah, well, and I'll let MLK. I mean, that's what MLK thought. I mean, look, MLK was, when he was talking to some of the early Panthers and Malcolm X, he was like, I don't think he was opposed to an armed resistance. He was just saying we're outnumbered, and look what happened to the Panthers. I mean, every single one of them was hunted and killed by the FBI. I mean, Hoover went after every last one of them. They killed Malcolm X. They deported Marcus Garvey. I mean, if you take up arms against the federal government, you will be killed. I mean, you really, there's no way that that's going to stand. And so I think, Martin Luther King was a really smart political player, and he said, look, that's not the way to do it. You have to actually do nonviolence because they have to see you as not a threat. So yes, I think integrating into the system, it seems like the only political path forward. But part of integrating into the system is not selling out on your claims for justice. And I think and even Martin Luther King doesn't survive. So. Yeah. It's a tough road, and I mean, I will say just the last thing, because you brought up the emotional toll. Yeah. I mean, racism is trauma. It's a trauma. It is a trauma that lasts, and it is something that just gets in your soul and in your body, and the more sort of research is done on health and the body and stress, I mean, really, you have this racism embedded in your body, and it comes out in these sicknesses. I mean, look at Jackie Robinson. Died of a heart attack early. There aren't black leaders in the struggle that live a long time. And the way W.E. Du Bois was able to do is he had to go to Ghana. He left
he had to get out of
here because he couldn't take it.
Right?
Yeah. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Is there any last words you want to leave us on, or any last thought, or any last?
Thank you. No, just thank you so much for reading the book. I just really, really appreciate it, and I'm glad that it's been useful. So thank you so much.
No, thank you so much, and I appreciate you integrating another aspect of it, because we tend to think of racism as kind of it's systemic, and we know that. And people always use that word systemic. Okay, but what does systemic mean? It's kind of like when people say white supremacy sometimes. Let's talk about the institutions that create that systemic world that we live in, as opposed to just saying this. So when you put it in the lens of these are the banks, this is how banks work, this is how lending works, this is how wealth creation works, it really puts that into a very tangible way that you can understand and break it down into bite-sized pieces, rather than having this sort of emotional conversation. We know it's emotional, but instead of just having this only emotional conversation about race and racism. So I appreciate this book as being something that's quantifiable and digestible in that way, and I want to thank you for that.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Master. Thank you so much for calling. I appreciate it.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
All right, fam. That was yeah. I appreciate that. And let me just say this. Shout out to her. Shout out to Master Badar, because she was the same person when I met her. She was the same person that she was on the phone, that she is there and everywhere. She's the same person. And I'm just gonna say that because I meet a lot of people who ain't the same person, and it's just very interesting. So I appreciate that. And we had to kind of go through this book a little bit fast because I had a lot of highlights in this book. So I'm sure this book will come up as we go through and have additional kinds of conversations. It will come up again and again and again. But it's very good in terms of also the kind of, well, this is what creates wealth. No, it's not just we have to get out of this sort of idea that we have that wealth creation is for us. I'm not talking about for what it is for somebody else right now. For us, it's sort of this individual agency. You even see what we talked about before in terms of other groups, that it can be generational in terms of not just inherited wealth, but you pass down careers, right? You pass down knowledge, that sort of thing. And so I appreciate something that's more quantifiable, but doesn't leave out the trauma of all of it. So that is what it is. And thank her. I appreciate it. Appreciate it. So we are going to the next call. I want to hear what everybody else has to say as well. 216, I'm coming to you. What's your name? Where you calling from? What's on your mind?
Hey, from the underground to the breakingbrown. This is Costa for life. Calling from Cleveland.
What you doing? Why you carrying on? Not just playing with you.
Listen, Sam, Mercer wrote this book like she was a Negro sharecropper in Mississippi and moved to Harlem by way of the Great Migration and put her money in Bingo Bank and wrote a book to tell us all about it. Okay?
Oh.
Now, I'm going to hit up 5 quick things. I'm going to let somebody else get some.
Okay.
The boys was proud of that Durham Bank. And you will see that on page 58.
Okay.
He was talking about they wasn't just a bank. He was like, they got a manufacturing businesses. They got like 5 establishments. He was so proud of them.
Yeah.
And I want to bring out the, that was on 58 at the bottom.
Okay.
And then I want to bring out on page 62 the wisdom of the Durham Bank. They were doing really well. They were competing against white folks. They were hiring white folks. But one thing that they decided was to mute their wealth and to be careful with it, because they learned from the other banks how they were burned down, how Tulsa went through its turmoil, and all of that. And I was like, wow, they even, when they constructed their bank, they tried not to make it as high as any other building that the white people had made.
Yeah, they tried to stay undercover.
Wow.
They tried to stay undercover. We don't want to let them know we got monies over here.
Yes. Okay, so my next thing I want to talk about is, I'm just going to say, I want to say Binga did the dang on thing. Okay, I was rooting for Binga.
I was rooting for him too, but I knew he was going to fail. Cause it was, yeah. I was rooting for Binga too, though.
Yeah.
I was.
Yep, and my next one is Brimmer. Brimmer is on page 201. Brimmer did the doggone thing. He nailed it.
Yeah.
Brimmer went on and he went and he testified before somebody. Who he testified? The House Committee.
Mm-hmm.
And he was saying that black families, it's like in the second paragraph, he said black families who were meant to be the cornerstone of the black business market simply did not have enough wealth or income to support a viable industry. He also goes on to say that we ain't had no bootstraps. Stop trying to tell us to pull ourselves up by the bootstraps.
Got no bootstraps.
And then he also said black banks just ain't up for the task for what we need them to do. Okay, he said that towards the bottom. And my last thing is, I got one more thing after that, Nixon, I got him on page 166. This right here almost had me tearing my little Mercer book up. On page 166, where he says he's trying to get the buy-in from the Southern people. And like at
Dixie
that
crack.
first paragraph right there, he say, lay off pro-Negro crap.
Yeah. Lay
You
off
know?
this pro-Negro crap.
I was like, oh, hell no. Okay. And then my last thing, and I'm off Yvette, it's on page 252. This right here had me chuckling a little. I said, no mercy didn't. Page 252, when she talks about the poor. It's like, when she got right, let me see. Right here on like the second paragraph, but the bottom of the paragraph, she starts talking about the poor.
Mm-hmm.
She says, this does not mean that the poor have less capacity, but that their capacity is overburdened because living in scarcity takes up significant mental spaces and leaves less room for other mental processes. But operating under pressure of scarcity have been shown to eat properly, parent poorly, make bad decisions, and even wash their hands less often. I was like, oh my corona. Yep, so
Cool.
I was like, this was a wonderful book. Thank you. I think it needs to be in the hands of every politician. They need to be reading it while it's quarantine, because this is the book that's going to help us get our reparations. Thank you. Peace.
No, thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you so much. And that was something else. You know what? There was one other thing. Thank you, fam. I appreciate. There was one thing I wanted to say too that I didn't touch on. In terms of Booker T. You know, there was one thing that he got wrong that I think, and I'm not blaming him. Like we don't know what we would have did in that time. Well, some of us, he did have opposition. So, but sometimes you just got to learn from other people's mistakes and stop. But I love Booker T. Calm down. I'm not saying nothing bad. What I'm saying is this. He had this idea that, like, well, if you own the white man's mortgage, you know, he'll respect you. He respect you because you respect it because you have wealth. And what you found, there was a story in this book, I can't remember where it was, about a printing press. And a black man on the printing press. And the man who burned it down was a white man who was resentful that that his boss, the owner of the printing press, was a black man. And so what you really found is that when you had wealth, it didn't create like respect from white people. It created like resentment. And Booker T said, wealth, you were just wrong. They just resented us for having money. They didn't respect us. And that's one thing that just was wrong, that he felt the way, but the way he felt was just not the right way to feel. So it is what it is. I'm going to my next caller. I am going to 267. 267, what's your name? Where you calling from? What's on your mind?
Hey, Yvette, it's Princess 6 calling from the ATL.
What's going on, Princess? How you doing?
I got so much to say, Yvette. First of all, I want to wish you a happy birthday.
All right.
And everybody in the chat, it's so Sunday, but everybody in the chat wishes them happy birthday.
Thank you, fam.
Happy birthday,
I
Yvette.
appreciate you. You all right.
Secondly, I want to give you an update on Project Takeover.
Oh, you done took over?
I'm about to. I just got invited to the Gwinnett County NAACP Executive Committee.
Oh, go ahead. See, y'all all need to be like Princess. A lot of y'all ain't taking over.
Yeah, so that's my update on Project Takeover. But once again, your book curation skills are excellent. This was another book where, as I was reading the book, my mouth was just on the floor. And I actually watched The Banker today, which reminded me of this book so much. But I wanted to read a passage from the book. And you may have read this, but I'm not sure. It's in chapter 1, and it said, the free slaves had to make the transition from being capital to becoming capitalists, from being chattel to owning it. They had to do this having neither money, property, nor friends. And that was by Frederick Douglass. Frederick Douglass said that. And that just really stood out to me because I don't know if our position has changed much since the time of Frederick Douglass was talking about when the slaves were free. I mean, we have not had access to capital, and I think the movie The Banker really brings that into stark focus, where you see, like, we couldn't get credit for businesses, and we could not get mortgages. That's game over in America.
Yeah.
And that's what we're facing. So
So this week has been so busy. It's been so much going on. Besides trying to get the book read, because I actually listened to it, but it's so dense with details and data that I went back and tried to hurry up and read it really quickly. But, you know, we have the proposal from the Congressional Black Caucus where, you know, this stimulus package. And, you know, it's just like they just don't understand. They start out by saying, well, we want to close the racial wealth gap. And they have not read The Color of Money, because there is really not a lot in their proposals, which is about 12 pages, that would actually close the racial wealth gap. So,
here's the thing. Here's the problem, Princess. Here's part of the problem that we face. The people who represent us operate at a very rudimentary level. And, you know, they are entrenched right now, but we may have to get to a position. I don't know how we do that. Like, but you can't represent us. You operate at too rudimentary a level to, like, even understand what I'm saying, right? You don't understand what you don't operate at a level that I need you to operate at to advocate for me, and that's what we're seeing from them.
Yeah. I agree, but I mean, the thing about it, and I know Martha referred to this when she was talking about the trauma of racism. You know, I think the trauma is trauma and it's traumatic.
Yeah.
But when you fight, I think sometimes you get to relieve or alleviate some of that trauma just a little bit. Because I know, like, when we do different things and we mobilize, you know, people really feel good, whether it's calling a congressperson, whether it's writing a letter, whether it's showing up. That is a good stress reliever. So if you guys aren't getting involved, if you ain't calling, if you ain't showing up, if you're not reading those books, y'all don't have the best stress reliever we got right now. And I also wanted to say and congratulate you with Tony, that because who else is giving politics the way y'all do and having authors call in and talk on a dime on this show? They're not doing that.
We appreciate it.
Enjoy your birthday. I'll talk to you soon.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And let me just say, what was I wrote down something else. Thank you, fam. I appreciate you calling in. What I wanted to say about what you said, though, is this. It's like, I think when you say how people feel, I think when you don't do anything and you don't take any action, you feel helpless. And so I think the better part of this is to not feel helpless and to not be helpless, not just not feel helpless, to not be helpless in this moment, and take action. And you have, and you know, I don't, part of the reason that we even have gotten to this place, people don't forget we came from nothing to here, where we're talking to people and having meetings with Congress people and stuff, is because they realize these people know what they're talking about. Like the knowledge, there's heads over tails. Like we're killing everybody with the knowledge, and that's very important. I want to go to my next call. I am going to 951-951. What's your name? Where you calling from? What's on your mind?
What's going on, Yvette? My name's Chad Elam.
Hey, Chad.
I'm here from Moreno Valley, California.
Okay.
I had a few things on my mind here I wanted to share with the ADOS family. First and foremost, I'd like to commend Mercer. She's not even black. However, she speaks a real good, she speaks a real good word for us. And her book's amazing. The Color of Black Money. I love it. Another thing I wanted to just wanted to commend her on that. Another thing I wanted to speak to you about was the whole Byron Allen case. Not to really bring that back up, but it just really bothered me how the NAACP, was there the day before during the case for the DACA. However, the next day on the steps, you've seen ADOS people frontlining with the T-shirts out there for Byron Allen. That's interesting to me. A lot of people don't realize how much ADOS is and how much it means to us. It's just baffling how we didn't see NAACP out there, but however we seen you guys, ADOS, there. So I commend you guys for that as well, for being out there. Wanted to say that. That's just amazing. Secondly, I wanted to talk about was the $2 trillion. We just seen the $2 trillion stimulus, that pretty much check get cut out for America. And I mean, if you look at a lot of Americans, Black Americans, you see our gripe right now is, we just asked for reparations.
Make it quick, fam.
500 years. However,
Make it quick.
Said
Make it quick for me because this is the book club, so make it quick.
No problem. I'll make it quick. However, they always said they needed to study or do some type of study, HR 40 study before they gave out any money. They handed over that $2 trillion like it was nothing. So that's also a very disrespect in my opinion. Just wanted to say that. And black people should be outraged over the Byron Allen case and over this $2 trillion.
Thank you, fam. I appreciate you calling in. I appreciate it. Thank you so much. I appreciate you calling. I am going to my next caller right now. I am going to going to going to 256. 256. What's your name? Where you calling from? What's on your mind?
Hey, it's the political guy, Trey Slade. What's up?
What's going on?
Nothing much. I just wanted to commend you on the book selection. I've been reading probably like the last 4 or 5 books. I couldn't finish the last one. When you got the little girl telling the daddy to chop the slave ear off, I just had to close the book. So, I just wanted to talk about basically when you talk about we are re-enslaved every generation. And what I'm going to start with is the Freedmen's Bank. When the Freedmen's Bank, whoever took over the Freedmen's Bank, they took their money and invested into the railroad system. And they also, propped up another bank. So it was us who were literally building the railroads through convict leasing. And we were financing railroads in their area through the money that was ours and we never were paid for it. And that goes along with the Bank of America, being the Bank of Italy. Like, we wanted to have our own banks, and we had the guy that went and became an FHA speculator, but we still couldn't get the FHA loans. So after that, you go into the war on poverty. Like, all the money that was going towards the war on poverty was then shifted to the war on drugs, the war against crime. And it's just like every generation, we get like a little glimmer of hope and the policy changes. And we don't follow the policy. And I'm glad that you guys are here because this time we're seeing it in action with the stimulus. I'm going to go ahead and let you go because I want some other people to get on. But I really enjoyed this book.
Thank you, fam. I appreciate it. And you know what? We should always learn from our ancestors. But one of the things, and not look at them as sacred cows and we can't criticize. One of the things that I'm finding is like you have to do both. Like you have to worry about wealth, and you have to have the policy in place for that. And you have to have rights, right? The wealth kind of enforces the right. So you have the right to an attorney or whatever, Constitution, you have the right under the law, blah, 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 blah. But all of that is enforced by a wealth. So like these two things have to go together, and Martin Luther King realized that at a certain point, and he tried to move in that direction before they put a bullet in his face. But I think that's the thing that we have to understand. That's why I always say that like there's no black business without black politics, and you could say it further. There's no black business without really good, specific black politics that does very specific things to infuse our community with wealth, and also have banks to continue to be engines of that wealth. And so those don't necessarily, in order to have a black bank, you have to have that black bank, to me, infused with capital, and not just capital from black people because we don't have enough. That just, to me, this just put that to bed. So I'm going now to 310. I'm coming to you. What's your name? Oh, I know who that is.
Shout out to everybody. I'm glad Princess was nice. I just want to start off saying that because I had some stuff to say about Princess tonight. So I'm just joking. I promise you. Hey, she's been doing great work. Shout out to her. I've seen her on the steps of Congress. Shout out to ADOSLA for setting up that meeting with Congressman Weber. We are out here pushing, but we are on the book club today. We got a chance to have Mercy Pauline. I'm going to try to do a Skype with her as well.
Yeah, that'd be good.
One of the things that I want to go to, being specific, is page 51 and tie it into the stimulus. And we can all turn to page 51. Between 1867 and 1917, 4,000 black-owned businesses grew to 50,000. By 1930, the number of black businesses had grown to 70,000. Many businesses arose as a direct response to segregation producing goods and services for blacks in the self-help economy. The broad survey of almost 2,000 businesses with over $500 capital that most had evolved from occupations dictated by slavery. And this is the part. House servants became barbers. Restaurant keepers and caterers, field hands became house servants became barbers, restaurant keepers, and caterers. Field hands became gardeners, grocers, florists, and mill owners. Those who had been plantation craftsmen used their talents to become builders and contractors, brick masons, painters, and blacksmiths. So the reason why I'm tying this back into the stimulus, into this moment with the pandemic, is a lot of us don't know the history of our beauticians and our barbers. A lot of us don't know the history of our restaurant owners. And I think that this book does an interesting service to them here on page 51 of tying back why these people are in these businesses and the historical context of those businesses. Now what we see is that those businesses are on the brink because those are hand-to-hand businesses that don't really transfer well to online business. And oftentimes, they're just an individual cutting hair. Maybe he has a shop with a couple barbers. I don't see how he survived the pandemic. So now that we know that, or let me say even the way the stimulus is structured, you have to ask yourself, if that is the history of black business in America, what is the Black Caucus doing not advocating for these specific types of businesses? And I can't really answer that for anybody. You know, it's an interesting thing. I wanted to kind of piggyback off of 2 points. First, coming from Mercer Bardarian, and the second coming from Princess. With Mercer, it was interesting because what she said, I want to hammer it home. She said black business is nothing, black banking is nothing more than boycotting. I know she don't want to say it straight because it's hard when you're not black to tell people the truth, which is this ain't really banking. That's really what, calling it straight, right, Vet?
Yeah,
this
it's not banking.
It's not really banking. It's boycotting from actual banking. Let me say this in and of itself, One United and all the stuff that they're talking about is not banking. It is boycotting from the actual whole infrastructure of American banking, not white banking, American banking. And I think for a lot of people that's hard to digest because so many people have issues understanding that we've been shut out. And I think it comes, I come over to what Princess said, which is, this idea of fighting as a release. And on one hand, I truly get that. But on another hand, I start to ask the question, do we understand what the fight is? And when I say that, I mean, we are not, because Mercer she spoke to it, but she didn't want to say it straight. She said basically that until you establish us as people, all the economic stuff can't even be done. What Boyce and Jay Morrison are almost presuming is that we've already been structured as economic people and not contagious to wealth. If you notice and you go back and get a chance to listen to what she said, this is the author of this book. She continuously said it in the present tense as well as the past tense. She didn't say it happened in the past and it's better now. She said that blacks have never been. I don't understand then how you follow Boyce Watkins or Jay Morrison. Jay Morrison should give you a refund on all your money so you can get some groceries. Period. Boyce Watkins should answer to the fact that them classes didn't make no millionaire. Period. But what we find in this book is that you have to ask yourself, why did you listen to these people if they don't know what they're talking about? And they don't match nothing in history. I'm saying that because I'm going to leave it here and let everybody else call in. But I will say, what this book shows is that we have an abdication of responsibility by everybody except for Adolf.
Appreciate it, Tom. Yeah, and I agree. An abdication of responsibility by everybody, because all these people is hustling. Everybody hustling hard. Boys hustling. And what is if you like this book, like in terms of banking and black capitalism, and that's why I read it, and I said, this should be the book, next book club book, because this should be the Bible of kind of what we're talking about. Because it contradicts everything Boy says. Like everything he says, it just contradicts it. And it's because he doesn't know anything about business or banking or whatever. He may know addition and subtraction. I think that's the extent of it. I don't know what all this finance, I got to see what that is in terms of, I don't know, but he doesn't understand like banking and the engines of capital. I saw him out in front of the Bank of Italy, the Bank of America, which was the Bank of Italy, saying if they can do it, we can do it too. You don't understand how immigrants were made white in a way that we weren't. Like how that's the most idiotic thing. I think he was on Instagram or something. He put it up on his YouTube community page. It's the stupidest thing I've ever seen. And like one of the things that we can't afford to do, we have to be led by data. We have to be led by information. But you can't be led by people who have an awful track record. So let me go to the next call. I'm going to, I don't know who this is. I'm going to Anonymous. Come to you. What's your name? Where you calling from? What's on your mind?
Hi, this is Cherie from Harlem. Can you hear me okay?
It's a little shaky. Like you calling from inside like another year or something. We're a little iffy in this one.
Okay, is this a little better?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so I have 3 quotes. First of all, thanks for taking my call.
No problem.
I have 3 quotes for you. Okay, the first one is on page 14 towards the bottom of the page. It's Frederick Douglass. It says, Frederick Douglass remarked that the history of civilization shows that no people can well rise to a high degree of mental or even moral excellence without wealth. A people uniformly poor and compelled to struggle for barely a physical existence will be dependent and despised by their neighbors and will finally despise themselves. And I think that's a strong testament to why we need to be paid our reparations.
Yeah. Especially when this country has this country has really weaponized too the idea that that's what Nixon did, and that's what even Bill Clinton did, and to a certain extent I think even Jimmy Carter did it. Like they have weaponized this idea. Not only are we poor and like don't nobody want to be around us, but they have entrenched into the American mythology that our poverty is our fault. And that is, I mean, that's the most evil thing that's ever happened. Like in the history of who we are. To make this thing that has happened to us and been done to us, even when this book goes into the ghetto and how the ghettos were created and how like roads ran through our communities and we couldn't get houses to leave the ghetto, so we got pushed into the ghetto and we got made to stay in the ghetto, like, and so people could exploit us in that space, and everybody else, including new immigrants, could go and live a wonderful life, including white people, new immigrants. But we got cordoned off into the ghetto with each other in this like hodgepodge. And then people ask you, when you're put into this little cesspool of deprivation, why you are the way you are, or why you became violent, or why you became an addict. Need you ask?
Right.
So I'll let you finish up, fam.
Exactly. Okay, so and I just wanted to mention that like we're also the bootstrap. So I never understood the idea of pulling yourself up by your bootstraps, and then I realized from reading these books that we are the bootstraps. But the next one is page 28. The last paragraph that's on the page, it says, there were no black managers in this inner circle, even though virtually all of the bank's depositors were black, though the bank's management did use black tellers as a front in certain speculations. For example, a black cashier named Daddy Wilson was often used by the white management as a figurehead and a buffer in some of their speculative lending schemes, and that made me think of Puff Daddy and the liquor industry, and him being the front to the liquor industry. And in one of your shows, you mentioned that it was important for him to say, "Hey, I'm the owner of this business."
Yeah, it's important for him to say, "This is my thing. I came up with French vanilla. The French vanilla was my idea."
Exactly.
Like, and it's just like French vanilla had never been your idea. French vanilla been around for a long time. You just somebody gave it to you for the vodka, and you said what you said because we don't understand that these people are marketers for different brands, and like we have allowed them, like nobody's ever come and said, "Hold on, pump your brakes, stop lying now. You come forth as a marketer for this brand." Nobody comes, don't come forth as a person like, this is my new. I heard he got part of a tequila company or something after that, but that took years. It's just like, for the most part though, you are and were a spokesperson. Like the company that owns Ciroc, and let me just say this before I go on. The company that owns Ciroc owns like so many different liquors. Like I looked it up when I did that show, and it's so many different liquors. Like there's not even like an owner of just Ciroc. They own like liquor. And it's just insane that we kind of bought into the idea, oh, this is his liquor company. Like, no. Like, what you mean? That's distribution. That's factories. That's all kind of stuff. He don't do. He got the money for that. We just don't understand wealth at all. But go on, fam. I'm sorry.
Exactly, Daddy Wilson. And then my last quote, is on page,
Actually, I don't remember the page of it. I think it's page 250. I'm not sure. Anyway, it's James Baldwin. It says, James Baldwin is my favorite author. It says, Baldwin also understood that the future of the Negro in this country is precisely as bright or as dark as the future of the country. The sooner Americans recognize that the fate of Black America is tied to the fate of white America, the faster it can achieve true democracy and shed the weight of historic injustice. And it makes me think about The Color Purple when Celie puts her fingers up in Mr.'s face and says, until you do right by me, ain't nothing good going to come to you. And I think about how things that are done in America against the entire population are first tried on us. We're always the crash test dummies. So whenever you have a situation where, for instance, now there's the crisis, the drug crisis, well, that was practiced on us first. So whenever the country allows things to be done to us, it ends up coming back and hitting the, more of the majority population. So that was my contribution. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sam.
I appreciate everything you're doing.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Okay, bye.
I am going now to 301. What's your name? Where you calling from? What's on your mind?
Good evening, Sister Yvette. How you doing? This is Marshall from the DMV. What's
What's going on, Marshall? How you feeling?
I'm good. It's just a little bit late, and man, I got to follow behind Tone and Miss Maradaran. So, man, Princess Six, all them giving incredible insights. So, for the sake of time, I'm going to break down my analysis. And this book really blew my mind a lot about black banking. So, I'm going to break it down to a couple of different pages and just follow me. You had started off your analysis early on page 5, and I'm going to go into a paragraph above where you started. It's the second paragraph, and it goes, the truth was that segregated communities could not segregate their money. In fact, black banks, which were created to control the black dollar, became the very mechanism through which black money flowed out of the black community into the mainstream white economy. The ghetto economy was weak, extractive, and costly. And the color of capital, commerce, property, trade, and money was white. So, and when reading this book, I kept going back to the charts that you and Tone always bring up about how we only have 2% of the wealth. I kept going back to the Matt Brunig chart that you always bring up. I'm not going to ask you, Tone, to bring up that chart tonight. But,
no, don't do it, Tone.
We always show how we are, 50% of black folks have zero to negative wealth. And even with, the promise of black banking, how do we, I was one of those people in the past who thought, how can we have these black banks when we don't have any wealth? Well, when you read that incredible breakdown on page 88, the whole page, when you talk about the type of banking that black banks can get into, that we have about, the fast, deposits and all, and I know I'm forgetting some of the terms and so forth, but the quick deposits and turnarounds and how we really can put our money into wealth, growth, deposits and so forth, because the people that we're getting our money from were basically wealthless. We have to get access to our money immediately, so we don't have those ways to grow it. And the next two quotes that I want to bring up real quick, on page 53, you have the prominent insurance executive, Maura Stewart. This is the, I think, third paragraph on page 53, where they speak about the American Negro has been driven into the awkward, selfish corner, attempting to operate racial business to rear a stepchild economy. Stewart explained that this was an economic detour that no other immigrant group had to pass through, as these groups were allowed passage to the economic Broadway of America. By contrast, blacks, despite centuries of unrequited toil, must turn to a detour that leads he knows not where. Basically, that's our hustle economy. All these groups are going towards wealth, and we're basically just,
we have to survive. So when we see somebody with money, when we see somebody with quick cash, or they have this, that decadent veil that Tone always talks about, we're like, why can't we follow them? Look, they're the example, that's it. But it's all because of this hustle economy that we've had to tie into to survive. And that takes me to the quote, you almost hit it. It's on page 87 when you went into earlier in your report. I'm going through, this is the third paragraph down, and this was the prominent banker Arnett Lindsay. And he's speaking about Arnett Lindsay concluded in 1929, months before the Great Depression, that there are not more than half a dozen banks owned and operated by Negroes, which are actually making even ordinary bank profits by specializing in commercial loans. He added that although these banks served as a useful purpose in promoting thrift and ownership, this is not common commercial banking in the
thrift is not teaching you how to save your money. That's not banking. That's not building wealth. That's not nothing.
Absolutely. The truth was that even before the Great Depression, these banks could not have gotten wealth for the black community insofar as they operated in a segregated economy. Everything is coming back to the limitations of blackness and what we are able to do in our own little separate areas. But in no way is it competing, with any type of like wealth generation that you have with white people. And I'm going to give an old example and the latest example. You quickly brought up Killer Mike. And on page 88, when Mr. Radaron gives that incredible breakdown of banking itself, I'm thinking maybe like 3 or 4 years ago when Killer Mike was first calling for black banks, the prominent, and going back into black, I think they're in your area of Atlanta. I forget the name of that bank, but he was able. Everybody wrote up the fact that he was able to get 8,000 accounts at a minimum of $100 into this black bank within a couple of weeks or so forth. So there was everything in it, and people was saying, there was a bank executive that said, "Thank you, you brought in all these deposits." But when you read that page and you understand that those were just quick withdrawals, just quick accounts.
Well, first of all, what is $100? First of all, what is $100?
Yeah.
$100 is nothing in banking. That's nothing.
Yes.
That is nothing. You cost me to be here. When you can only put in $100, you cost me money.
Absolutely, you're costing the money. What one executive, not so much an executive, but somebody who's into banking that I spoke to, was like, what he should have done was go get, and you want the unicorn black folks, you want the LeBron James, the Will Smiths, the entertainers, you want the ball players, or even the $1 million executives, the few that we have, to invest that money so that they can do more with it. And I didn't understand that at the time until I read that page, and I read it a couple of times. I'm like, okay, this is what my man was talking about. And here's a clearer example. This is before the real estate crash, before 2008. I have an account in a black bank in the DC area. You can Google it, for whatever, black bank is here. And I remember when I went to go open my account, the big banner that they had outside that bank was, "Now we offer ATM services." And I went in to get my account, and the friend that I had with me at the time was looking across the street at the major banks, the Wells Fargo, at the time I think it was still Farmers Bank, but Wells Fargo, the Bank of America, a local big regional bank, M&T Bank. And across the street, they had banners for major CDs, invest $10,000 and you get a CD of I think 5.something%. And my friend was telling me at the time, why are you going here to the black bank? Why don't you go across the street and get in on one of those CDs? Now, this is at the time when you could have a CD at 7%. Now, please, 1 point something. And I'm like, well, I ain't got $10,000. And he's like, well, don't you think you ought to get $10,000 to go across the street and put your money there? And I'm like, well, I ain't got that money. Look, I'm trying to support a black bank, and now they got the ATMs. The difference between that was one bank was propping up the fact that now you can get your money instantly that we couldn't do in the past, whereas the white bank across the street that has generational wealth that goes back to slavery, especially with Bank of America and what we know about Wells Fargo, is now, you know, like pressing up the fact that, you know, through our generation, well, we can offer you something that can grow your money, where the black bank across the street that you're prideful to invest, that you're prideful to put your money in, can't offer you and may never be able to offer you.
Well, hold on.
They don't have the
But hold on, you hitting on something powerful. This was in the book too. When they were talking about doing black banking and black business, one of the things that was said was like there is a cost. There is an additional cost to do that business. So if I'm already poor as a black person, then I have to pay an additional cost, like a donation, to do black business with you. You're not competitive within the market. It's kind of like what we talked about with Voices flashcards a while back. I can get cheaper flashcards somewhere else, like Amazon or wherever, but you want me to do that with you because you're black. So you want me to pay more money because you're not competitive in the market and because you don't understand that you can't do business. This isn't business because you're not competitive. Business is competition. They have put us in a position to not be competitive, and you want to say, well, you know I can't be competitive, but pay me extra. That's not business, though.
Yeah, that's true. That's very true. So, I mean, people have been, like, tearing up some of these comments tonight, and I'm going to stop it there. Two things. Of course, you always talk about, you know, what's the next book club. Unfortunately, due to this health scare, some of us are going to be holed up for a little while longer. Some of us are going to be, you know, having to make some hard decisions. So, you know, part of it to, you know, keep us motivated to get into, I always bring up, you know, the lengthy book, Edward Baptiste, The Half Has Never Been Told. Also,
you wanted to read the long book, though. No, I was just playing.
Well, you know, it's a great, it's long,
it
but
is,
you know,
it
it speaks to, even with banking right now, with, you know, with how a lot of these, especially farmers banks and then these huge conglomerates got started, was all, you know, off of us, off of selling us, off of insuring us, and so forth. So, also, a lot of us ADOS are going to have to make some hard choices, and some of us can't stay in the same areas. So there's a great book by Sister Isabella, The Warmth of Other Suns.
Okay, I remember that book. I haven't read it, but I remember when it came out.
The Warmth of Other Suns. I can't say that I've read it all the way. I started it and then put it down, but you know, everybody that I've spoken to loves the book, and I think that would be something that we could get into. Lastly, sister, always, you know, I give you roses, love you.
Thank
so
you.
Let me
appreciate it much.
Happy birthday to you. Don't go out and party.
No.
You cannot get sick. We need you, Yvette. My sister,
What's wrong with you?
Shout out to ADOS. I'm up here singing off.
Appreciate it, boss. I ain't going nowhere. I'm not going nowhere. Thank you, fam. I appreciate that. I appreciate it. Thank you. Oh, y'all so funny. Yeah, I'm not going nowhere. I'm not going out there. It's the corona. Oh, I can't do it. And I usually will go out and have a nice meal on my birthday, but I can't even do that. Can't even go out and have dinner. Nowhere. It's a shame. I'm going to my next call. I am going to 617-617. What's your name? Where you calling from? What's on your mind?
Hey, that is Reggie. What's going on?
What's going on, Reggie? How you been?
Oh, I appreciate you so much for letting me in on this. This is one of, like, my favorite books on Black history and on Black people. Just a big shout out to Mercer Baradaran. I think it's so ironic that the sister of Mercer, the author, from Iran, she just got here.
Yeah, as a kid, as like what, 8 or something? I don't remember what it was.
And yet she has dedicated herself to educating herself and advocating for me. To compare that to all these other recent arrivals or progeny of immigrants, whether we're talking the Ilhan Omars of the world, or the, you know, or you could just go down the list and you can see the difference between someone who dedicates himself to actually doing that educational work, and when you aggregate, you know, all of that history and data in a way that she has, if you don't come out on the other side of that and advocate for me, you're just a horrible person.
Well, not only that, Reggie, let me just say this. Let me just interject too. Like, you know, I think what Master has kind of proved is that you can like have family or whatever that's not anchored here. And still understand race in America, right? So like your grandfather or great grandfather or great grandmother or grandmother or mother, whoever, doesn't have to be born here for you to understand race in America. It's not really as complicated as some people try to make it out to be. We have people who have been here 3 or 4 generations and like, well, I don't quite get it. You know, my family's Irish and they made it. Well, if you don't get it, what this kind of goes to, if you don't get it, then you just haven't made an effort to get it. It's not like, you know, it's not like, you know, you grew up in this country. We have a lot of people who are American. Like, she grew up for the most of her life here, from what I see. Like, we have a lot of people who grew up here and their parents came here. Like, right? And then you still try to pretend to me that you don't understand race. And I think one of the things that it shows us is that with a lot of people have been abdicating responsibility and using I don't know as kind of a dodge. It's easy to know if you decide that you want to know and understand. So I'm gonna let you talk, Rich.
Yeah, exactly, and it reminds me of that phrase that was a sister who called a couple shows back who said, "We're not dealing with people of color. We're dealing with people of choice." So whether you choose to do the work or not, but I'm gonna get into the book. Page 132. One of the things that I saw for me that was interesting was not the story of the banks or the economy, but just the story of the history of America and how it frames our politics and our culture, and how government is instrumental in actually fueling that. Because when I look at page 132, what I see is the government actually setting the stage for the decadent veil. I'm going to tell you what I mean. It's like the second paragraph. It says, To defeat communism, America needed to tell the world a story of American racial progress. It was decided to focus on the telling of the story of the black elite. As part of a public relations blitz on race, the U.S. Information Service released a promotional pamphlet called The Negro in American Life in 1950. The story was a pamphlet that portrayed one of redemption. Now, to go down a little further towards the end, what they said was, in need of more inspirational stories of black rights to broadcast, the State Department called on the Division of Negro Affairs in 1951. Voice of America wanted to broadcast biographical information of successful black entrepreneurs across the world to be used as an ideological weapon. The story of black capitalists was a strong counterpoint to communist charges that American capitalism relied on racial exploitation. That's right there. To where America literally broadcast out to the world, here are a couple of hand-picked Negroes that are doing good. Anything that deviates from that, black people are the problem. And when government does anything, whether it's promulgating information or Supreme Court decisions or passing laws or setting precedent, it reverberates through the culture and it reverberates through the private sector. And you see it even today. They prop up the NFL, the NBA. It's the decadent veil, just like Tone said it. But back in the 50s, here is the government creating the framework for that. Now, I'm skipping ahead to page 219, and what's interesting, what I took from it is that what it really speaks to a bipartisan investment in black failure to make America run. So the second paragraph, during the 1976 election, candidates from both parties took Nixon's lead to oppose any measures of integration. And then Gerald Ford comes along and he says that he doesn't want to impose integration on white neighborhoods, which he labeled an ethnic treasure. Gerald Ford, Republican. Fast forward to Jimmy Carter, he's up next, where he says, I see nothing wrong with ethnic purity of neighborhoods. So you have both a Democrat and a Republican saying the exact same
What's the chances? What's the chances, Reggie, if there's no coordination?
What's that?
I say, what's the chances of everybody saying the same thing about where the Negro belongs on the bottom?
Exactly. Now here's the kicker. I'm skipping down a little further in the paragraph. The cliched celebrating diversity replaced the harsher accusation of segregation and could not be challenged as discriminatory. Now, pretty much what I see this saying is that the language of diversity was specifically put up to derail black progress and derail black politics. So whenever you hear anyone, especially from the left, talking about diversity, that is a racist dog whistle. And that's all we hear coming from the left. This is diverse. I need a diverse cabinet. And then you'll see the Republicans do it too. You know, they get a black woman in Utah in Congress. They say, look, first woman of color from Utah, we got a black woman over here. It's a bipartisan effort to shut down black progress. Moving forward to page 221, where it talks about the MBDA, Minority Business Development Agency. Like, even in the institutions, the language is watered down. We go from Negro to black to African American to minority, and this is what Nixon and Reagan did, where they talked about free market capitalism to where they moved it to an opportunity society. And President Reagan specifically, and this is at the bottom, when President Reagan spoke to minority business owners in 1987, he explained that the tax cuts created opportunity for those who had been economically disenfranchised, the poor and minorities. Understand, this is the conservative president who's coming up with this language of diversity, of disadvantaged communities. This is all through the Democratic platform.
Yeah, that's true.
Racist Reagan, like Reaganomics, crack era, mass incarceration, the same language he is using are on the lips of our so-called progressive champions. So, and now fast forward to page 223, second paragraph. In the 1978 case, this is the Supreme Court, Regents of University of California versus Bakke, the plurality of the court upheld race-based preferential treatment in university admissions, but rewrote the underlying premise of affirmative action. Justice Lewis Powell held that the only compelling state interest that could justify affirmative action was increasing diversity. This is out of the lips of the Supreme Court. The language of diversity replaces the language of justice.
Say that again, Reg. You gotta slow that down. The language of diversity does what?
It replaces the language of justice for the descendants of slaves. And in his dissent, because Thurgood Marshall, may he rest in peace, he dissented, and he said that bringing the Negro into the mainstream of American life should be a state interest of the highest order, and warned that a failure to do so is to ensure that America will forever remain a divided society. Now, I think this will be my last one, but in 1971, page 225, in 1971, Nixon revises his black capitalism program, and what he talks about, and it says for the first time, Executive Order 11625, that defined the term minority business enterprise. This is an executive order which pretty much whitewashes our justice claim in terms of the language, because minority can mean anyone. And this is also where women, female-owned businesses come in, which is, of course, as we understand, white women. And here's the language that they use.
Okay.
A minority business enterprise is one that was owned or controlled by one or more socially or economically disadvantaged persons. Such disadvantage may arise from cultural, racial, chronic, economic circumstances, or background or other similar cause. Such persons include, but are not limited to, Negroes, Puerto Ricans, Spanish-speaking Americans, American Indians, Eskimos, and Alouettes.
Eskimos.
It makes the language so broad, and I'm just going to say this. In terms of the language that Nixon used, Richard Nixon, in terms of the language that Ronald Reagan used to describe race in America, I see no difference between Ronald Reagan and Richard Nixon. I see no difference between them and the Alexandria Ocasio-Cortezes of the world, the Elizabeth Warrens of the world, not even the Bernie Sanders of the world. You don't need to get specific when you talk to me or about me. This is about specificity. Specificity is what matters. When you speak on me or about me, it's descendants of slaves, Black American, whatever, you recognize that a specific debt that has been denied me is owed to me. Racist dog whistles. The language of diversity is a racist dog whistle that has taken over the left. It is a bipartisan investment in Black failure. And in November...
Wait a minute, Reggie. You be running over the good lines. A bipartisan investment in Black failure.
Yep, it is a bipartisan investment in Black failure. And I just want to end with, and I have two questions for you that kind of ties into this. Since the Supreme Court sets precedent, first question, what do you think about, not saying revisiting the ADOS agenda, but maybe adding to it, or since they've weakened the Civil Rights Act of 1866, should we now call for some sort of legislative solution?
I think we have to. Because what happened was, the court did something that we needed it to do. It didn't do the one thing that we needed to do. We needed them to like uphold this and make it a broader standard as opposed to a narrow standard that don't matter because you can't meet that but for standard. But now that we know, right? Because it was unclear, because it was what was happening. The court was using two different standards. Like if you was in a liberal state, it was doing one thing, and if you was in a conservative state, it's doing one thing. Now you see, like, okay, they have basically said that this isn't a law no more. So I do think we have to pivot towards new legislation, because they have said once the Supreme Court does what it does, because they basically, as far as I'm concerned, they nullified that because you can't prove that. So then the whole thing has to be, okay, we need legislation. We need new legislation. And how do we make that happen? But I think you're right with this now in the rear view. We do have to tweak that agenda. And it might be helpful going into the conference if we do something or have something or not just a session but an unveiling too of what that reworked what it looks like reworked. Like what would that piece of legislation look like for us if we write it and push it? Because obviously we have to write our own laws and then just try to hand it to the CBC and hope they introduce it and advocate for it, because that's just kind of where we are.
Yeah, I totally agree, and I think it also ties into one of the most important pieces in the ADOS agenda that I feel that y'all put in there was the specific designation for us on the census, and to take it a little bit further, and you've said this before, that we have to be made through some sort of mechanism. We have to be made a specific protected class all over again, and I feel like the ADOS designation is a good marker for that.
Because it makes us a class to begin with. Before you make us a protected class, you have to make us a class. And so...
Absolutely. Yeah, make us a class, make us a protected class, and that any redress that we receive that's specific for us can survive a constitutional challenge, because they've watered it down with diversity, and you can't be specific about race. That is going to be a problem if we don't address it in the way that you have. And then the second question, I'll leave it at that. for the next book club, what do you think about maybe democracy in black as we head towards November, to understand down ballot and what that means and really galvanize that? Because I'm so tired of Washington. Like,
did you like that book? Did you like that book? Did you enjoy that book?
I didn't get it yet.
Okay.
But I mean, that's the one that Eddie Glaude was talking
I know.
about.
I started it. I like Glaude in terms of normally as a thinker. I started it. I didn't. But then I kind of puttered out a little bit. But I'll look at it. I'll start up again and see what I think about it. I have it. I didn't finish. I started and puttered a bit. So I'll go back to it and see if my initial reaction was the right reaction, or whether I was just in a space. Sometimes just in a space you don't want to read stuff. So we'll see.
But thank you so much for taking my call.
No problem, Reg. You was on fire. Appreciate it, fam. Thank you so much. You, Reg, just tied it all up together with the diversity, and he tied it up, put a bow in it. I'm gonna take a couple more calls. We at about the 2.5 hour mark. Y'all gonna make the mods real tired if y'all. So I'm going right now to, let's try to make them quick, and I'm gonna try to get a couple more people in here. 216. I'm coming to you. What's your name? Where you calling from? What's on your mind?
Hello?
216, what's going on?
216, what's going on, Yvette?
What's going on? Don't let me catch you flat-footed. Stay on your toes. I can hear you.
Okay, well, I have my, first of all, Yvette, we met you at the ADOS conference in Louisville. I have my 10-year-old son. He's on spring break, and he stayed up because he wanted to say happy birthday to you.
Oh, tell him thank you.
Happy birthday.
Thank you, fam. Thank you for that. You been good? He been good?
We're going to be real quick here, Yvette. And I'm going to follow up on my man, Reggie Rez. I'm D-Thought, Cleveland, representing Cleveland. I'm going to tie the book to Cleveland. But one of the things that Reggie kind of elaborated on is the fact that language is very important. And I want to go to page 278. Page 278. And on page 278, let me bring it up here so I can read. And it basically says, self-help microfinance cannot overcome macro inequality. So this is all of the rhetoric and the stuff that Boyce, Jay Morrison, John Hope Bryant, it just can't work. And one of the things that we have to do and we have to think about, and I think another good book to reference, I'm into the Dr. Sandy Doherty, he talks about this acronym called ARC. Okay. Acknowledgement, redress, and closure. True, now, to the point of acknowledgement, it's very important that we understand that we got an issue here with just acknowledging the harm that has been done to us.
That's true.
The book kind of hits toward this. Mercer kind of goes to a poll, and it is she goes to the poll, and then in the poll it suggested that, let me go to the page here. She talks about the poll, and it was 58% of black folks don't agree with reparations. So we got a lot of work on educating our own about reparations. That's insane to me that we would have that large a number of people that's not for reparations. And we have 81, and she goes on to say 81% of whites. So we already understand that. But I wanted to talk about the acknowledgement, and I want to lead with this here about why it's so important. We have to get a language to understand the condition. And the language we have to understand is what I call victim survivor. And really quickly here, because America has made us to feel that being a victim means that it's some type of weakness associated with that. So a victim is a person harmed, injured, or killed as a result of a crime, accident, or an event or action. And what I see is that we are the victims, and I consider myself a victim of what they call a survivor. A survivor, a person who is who's surviving, especially remaining alive after an event in which damage has occurred.
So until we understand a victim-centered approach and not let people shame us for the damage, Jim Crow, convict leasing, all those things that have been done. One last thing on page 282, when we talk about acknowledgement and why Sandy Doherty talks about acknowledgement is not enough, that's just we have to get to redress. We look at the president of the Wachovia Bank, and it suggests on that page the Atlanta First Bank got all of their money from convict leasing. We can tie that all the way to coal mining, from sharecropping to coal mining, convict leasing. And it talks about how the white bank president was very sorry and showed contrition, and the employees cried together, those things. And at the end, the solution was a scholarship. The scholarship doesn't redress, as what Dr. Doherty talks about. And I'm going to leave with this real quick. Dr. Doherty calls, he says restitution. Restitution is the restoration of survivors to the conditions before the injustice incurred, to the condition that they might have obtained the injustice not taking place. So that's all I wanted to say. To keep doing your work. And one last
Think about that,
thing about connecting the dots. I think it would be great if we had a book club show at the end of the year that ties all of these great books that you have selected together, and try to do like a connect the dots and connect with them.
Oh, you want a master class of the book club.
Yes, ma'am. You take care, man. We love
You too. Thank you, fam. Thanks for the birthday wishes too. I appreciate you. All right, fam. Let me go to one more call. I know that the phones is lit up. We're gonna have to just have everybody be able to have this conversation or bring the book up in another conversation. I don't know. We'll talk about it. Let's go to 917. 917. I'm coming to you.
Yvette to the call now. What is going on? You got us reading out here in Brooklyn. What's up?
What's going on? I see you've been on hold an hour and some change. I said I gotta go. He has been on hold a long time.
You had me on hold all night, but it was worth it. Man, these callers was lit tonight, man. I mean, they was breaking it all down. A lot of them went over a lot of stuff that I want to talk about, so I only got a couple of points to hit on, and hopefully I'll do it justice.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, so really quick, I wanted to jump to page 76.
Okay.
And here we're going to talk about the black immigrant that was set up in Harlem. And so it says the lack of bank credit for blacks in Harlem led many of its residents, especially new Caribbean immigrants, to form informal credit circles to lend to each other to facilitate businesses and home purchases. And this is important because when I talk to a lot of the non-ADOS black people in New York now, and they talk about, the concept of flat blackness, and want to say all black is the same, in the book here we see that they never came here with the intention to be treated like us or have the same camaraderie with us. They set up their own separate institutions, their own separate mechanisms for credit and for purchasing. So it wasn't like they extended that to us. It was their own thing that they set up. And I want to jump next to 62, page 62. And there, the author, she talks about she in the previous page, she spoke about the fate of a lot of the successful black business hubs that we had, the Tulsas, and the Wilmingtons. And here she says, on page 62 at the bottom, it's unclear why Durham escaped the fate of Tulsa, Wilmington, and other cities that became targets of white resentment. Because Durham was one of the most successful. I think Kunta touched on it when she said they were purposely not building buildings as high as or as lavish as the white ones to try to escape any type of hostility. But when we go to page 58,
okay,
and this goes to what you have beaten into my head, into the head of us
I mean, it's more times than I can count. And here it says, a Durham, on page 58, near the bottom, it says, a Durham newspaper, the Morning Herald, spoke of the city's hands-off policy in criticizing the governor's hostility to black business in the state. If the Negro is going down, for God's sake, let it be because of his own fault and not because of our pushing him. And so, in line with the mantra that's been ADOS since I've been involved and doing the work, there can be no black business without black politics.
None.
The reason why Durham escaped the fate of Tulsa and Wilmington is because state officials had hands-off policy and even told black people to go tell other black people that whites and blacks are working shoulder to shoulder here in this city. And so without black politics, there can be no black business. Bottom line, period.
Yep.
And lastly, I want to close off the thoughts with A.G. Gaston. And we're going to go to 55 real quick. And on 55, it says, let me read a little bit about him. A.G. Gaston, first he sold the miners lunches cooked by his mother, and with that small pool of profits, he became a lender. He lent small sums of money to the miners at 25% interest. In another financing venture, Gaston bought the state-issued script that black teachers were being paid their salaries with in exchange for cash. He bought the script at a 50% discount and sold it at full value, taking half the teacher's salary for the service. With practices like these, it is no wonder that critics would blame black businessmen for exploiting their own race. So I want to put a pin in that because I also want to bring up Binga. I know a couple people were saying Binga did it right and Binga did his thing to start that bank. But when I looked up Binga on my own and did some other research, what happened with Binga is, first of all, he married into one of the richest families in Chicago at the time. There was rumors that he did it only for the money because of the way his wife looked and her appearance, but we ain't going to get into all that. That's a whole other conversation. But in addition, during his rise and building his banks and building that arcade, what he also did was he advocated politically for regulations in the banking industry. And the reason why he did that is because not to further the people or not to help him compete with other white banks, but it was to purposely sabotage the other black banks coming up at the time. And so I'm saying all that to say
he wanted that market share.
That when we talk about the voices, we talk about the Tariq Nasheeds, we talk about the judge, we talk about the Bishop Swans, we talk about all these black business people that we say, listen, if this is your expertise, the Jay Morrisons, advocate for the people in the space that you say you are expert on. When we look at a lot of the black business owners of the past that are even heralded as, black success stories, we see that the only time they ever advocated for anything politically was when it was going to be for their own personal
when they was going to get
gain.
paid. You know who I like though? I'm gonna let you finish that thought. Who was the one? Why is the name just escaping me that quick? The one I just talked about, who said I see economics and race uplift as one and the same. Him. What was his name? It wasn't Gaston. It was the other guy. He was the one who most resonated with me.
Who was that? His name is escaping me too.
Yeah, but he was the one who most resonated with me. Like, no, this is part of a collective mission. But I understand what you're saying in terms of business is business, right? And so a lot of what happens is that they want to do business. That's why they're there, as opposed to wanting necessarily collective uplift. Collective uplift because collective uplift or any kind of, if you uplift black people, that's good for my bank or whatever. But I understand what you're saying. It's not taken outside of like monetary gain or whatever. So that's kind of why you keep saying. I understand that. Yeah, that makes sense.
Right, but what they do is like you said, business is business, and that's fine. But again, like you emphasize when we talk about black business of today, where most black business is just a black side hustle and mostly a black donation because you ask your friends to support you just because you're you or just because you're black. So if you're going to do business and just leave it at business, then do business. But what a lot of them do is they exchange that black capital and that black relationship. And a lot of them use the black church as a means to say, here's the reason why you should do business with us. Not because we're doing good business, but because you know us. And so when you do that and you try to monetize blackness, then we have the right to criticize you for your business shortcomings.
Yeah, and I think it was the Abram guy. Somebody had mentioned that I was talking about. But I think you're right though, in the sense of, like, I've said this before, either it's gonna be business or it's gonna be we are a tribe and we love each other. You can't be like, if you can put it together like Abram tried to, I guess you can. But what they try to do is be like, oh, you got to work with me. We all in it together. And then the next moment is business. Well, wait a minute. What is it? Like when I owe you money, well, I'm trying to do business. Y'all never want to do business. But I didn't give you money or do business with you because you're good at business or because you have a good business. I did it because you're black. You're not competitive. But then when I owe you money or something, it's also, oh, y'all don't want to pay. This is not competitive. This is you're not doing a market. So, and even how they had the churches tell people you should be involved in this bank or do this black business stuff or whatever. So it becomes a religion of black business. It's so integrated in what we do in terms of religiosity as well, in terms of like uplift. So yeah, it gets confusing.
Right. It gets so intertwined that we can't choose and we can't make a business decision because it's filled with emotion.
Yep. That's it, fam.
Yep. Oh, can I just say one last thing?
Sure, go right ahead.
To close out the black business?
Sure.
One last thing. It was on 54. I know I was forgetting something. A lot of people spoke about the stepchild economy, so I just want to bring this point home. And it says, in this stepchild economy or economic detour, it is no wonder that the few black businesses that experience sustained and profitable growth were providing services for which there was large demand that white businesses were unwilling or incapable of meeting. And so in the same way government chooses winners and losers, white capital still has the power today to choose winners and losers. The reason why they were able to have the success they had because white capital didn't want to have nothing to do with it. But the minute white capital does want something to do with it, it shuts down.
It's finished.
Any
and you see that
we have going on.
And you see that with black hair care, fam. You see that, like, that's why we got so many barbers and beauticians now. You can't, like, do black hair. But even when you talk about black hair care products, like, that's why you went from Madam C.J. Walker to, like, what did Revlon say? Ain't gonna be no more black business. We finna take that over. We decide we want to be in that market. So the minute they want to be in that market, you just finished. That's not competitive. That means you haven't been given the tools to compete in the American market, which means you haven't been given the tools to be American. So thank you, fam. I appreciate it. I appreciate you calling in.
Thank you for letting me in.
Yeah, that was helpful.
Yeah, happy birthday. I'm not going to sing or nothing because we don't need the dogs to start barking outside, but I will send you as much birthday love as I can without
Thanks,
a song.
Don't get the dogs howling. It's late.
I appreciate it.
All right, fam. Thank you so much. That was a very informative call. That's going to be it for tonight, though, fam. We at like 12:45. But if you didn't get in, we're going to continue this conversation. This stuff is going to continue to come up. We might still talk about some of this stuff next show. If you didn't get in, I apologize. I know that the lines were full, and the people who talked about the show had a lot to say about the show. It is what it is. But we will continue to talk about this. This was kind of a profound book, and I won't be mad about you or mad at you if you bring up this book in the context of future shows, because I know some of y'all want to talk about it. Everybody read it. We're going to continue to talk about it in the context of what we do coming up or whatever, what have you. So I'm not going to be mad if you off topic and you bring up the book or something like that for this. So, fam, woo, it's time to go to bed because I know y'all tired. It's been book club night. So, make sure you hit that. I will have the next book coming up soon. Especially since some of y'all are quarantined, some of y'all are off and these sorts of things and all of these sorts of things going on. So please hit that like button before you leave, though. Please hit that like button before you head out. Subscribe to brown.com. Please do that. I would appreciate it if you would do that. Hit that bell if you have not. Hit the subscribe button if you have not done that. And get some rest. Finish your libations, your popcorn, whatever you had. Say goodbye to everybody. And fam, we will talk again next time. Great book club time. Nice chat.